Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are standing very still, and the world in front of you is green. So many shades of green. The pale, almost silver green of willow leaves catching the light. The deep, heavy green of oak trees standing thick along a riverbank, and between them, moving slowly, quietly, a river. It is wide and calm. The water catches the sky and holds it, a soft grey blue, shifting gently as a breeze passes through. This is the Seine, and this is where our story begins. Not with kings or cathedrals, not with grand boulevards or glittering lights, but here, in this quiet, ancient place, where the river bends through a landscape that has barely been touched, where the air smells of wet earth and river grass, and something green and alive that you cannot quite name. Welcome. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop. Tonight, and across many nights to come, we are going to travel together through one of the most extraordinary cities the world has ever known, Paris. But we are going to start long before it was a city at all. We are going to start at the beginning. If you could stand on the bank of the Seine, perhaps 10,000 years ago, what you would notice first is the silence. Not a complete silence. There are birds, always birds, and the low constant sound of the river moving over stones. But there is no hum of voices, no cartwheels on cobblestones, no bells, just the river, and the trees, and the sky. The land here is low and marshy in places. The river splits around a long, narrow island, sitting in the middle of the water like a leaf that has come to rest. The ground near the banks is soft beneath your feet. You can feel it giving slightly with each step, cool and damp through the soles of your feet. Early people found this place and understood it immediately. The river gave them fish. The forests gave them game. The island in the middle of the water gave them something even more precious, safety. Water on all sides, easy to defend, easy to watch. For thousands of years, people lived quietly along these banks. We do not know their names. We do not know their words. But we know they were here because they left small traces behind, flint tools, the marks of fire, the faint outline of lives lived close to the water. Then, slowly, something changed. By around 300 years before the Common Era, a Celtic people had settled here with intention. They were called the Parisi, and they chose this river, this island, this bend in the Seine, with great care. The Parisi were skilled. They knew how to work metal. Beautiful gold coins have been found, stamped with horses and abstract curving lines, warm and heavy in the hand. They traded along the river. They built. They had a name for their settlement, and that name, softened and changed across 2,000 years, would eventually become the name we know today. Paris. When you say that word quietly to yourself now, it carries all of that time inside it. The green riverbank, the soft mud, the smell of the water in the morning, the sound of a small community going about its days, not knowing, how could they know, what this place would one day become. The Parisi lived here through seasons and generations. They watched the river rise in winter and settle in summer. They crossed the water in flat boats, feeling the cold spray on their faces. They gathered around fires in the evening, and the smoke rose up into a sky full of stars that no city light had yet dimmed. It is a world that is hard to picture now, but it was real. It was here. And in some quiet way, it is still here, underneath everything, beneath every stone and street and building that came after. The river remains. The Seine is still moving, just as it moved then. slow and steady and unhurried. And if you find yourself drawn to this story, to these long, slow journeys through time and place, then stay with us. There is so much more to come. A gentle like, a quiet subscribe. It helps more people find their way here, to this calm corner of history. For now, though, just rest. The river is still. The willows are still. And somewhere on that small island, in the gathering dusk, a fire is just beginning to glow. The sound comes first. A soft drip of water from the oar blade. Then silence. Then another drip. It is the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the whole world is holding its breath with you. You are still here beside the river. The mist is still low on the water, but something is beginning to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, just a slow, gentle turning, the way a season changes without you ever seeing the exact moment it happens. This is the Seine, and the people who live along its banks are the Parisi. They are a Gallic tribe, these people, skilled and practical. They know this river the way you know your own hands. They fish it, they trade on it, they build their homes on the island that sits in the middle of it, the island we would one day call the Ile de la Cité. It is a natural shelter. Water on all sides. Easy to defend. Easy to watch. Their coins are beautiful, actually, small and golden, stamped with horses that seem to gallop right off the metal. If you could hold one in your palm right now, it would feel surprisingly light, warm from being carried close to someone's body. But the world beyond this river is moving. And in 52 BCE, it arrives. Julius Caesar is pushing through Gaul, through what we now call France, with his legions. He is methodical, patient. He takes territory the way water takes stone, slowly, and then completely. The Parisi join a larger Gallic revolt under a leader named Vercingetorix. It is a brave thing to resist, and for a while it holds. But Caesar's forces are enormous and well supplied, and they do not stop. The Parisi, knowing they cannot hold their settlement, burn it themselves before the Romans can take it. You can almost imagine the smell of that, wood smoke thick in the cold air, the hiss of thatch catching flame, the sound of people moving quickly in the dark, taking what they can carry. It is a painful kind of practicality. Destroy what you love so that someone else cannot have it. But the Romans come anyway, and they stay. They call the place Lutetia. Some historians believe the name may come from a word meaning mud or marsh, which feels right, honestly. The riverbanks here are soft and wet. The ground gives a little under your feet. You can feel the dampness rising through your sandals. If you are a Roman soldier standing here in the 1st century, wondering what this soggy island is going to become, the Romans do what Romans do. They build. They move the main settlement from the island to the left bank, the southern shore of the river, and there, on the gentle slope of what will one day be called the Latin Quarter, they lay down streets in a grid. Straight lines, order imposed on marshy ground. They build a forum, a place for commerce and civic life, open to the sky, busy with voices and footsteps, and the smell of bread and animals and dust. They build baths, the thermal kind, fed by heated water, where you could sit in warm steam and feel the cold of a northern winter soften around your shoulders. Parts of those baths still exist today, buried under later centuries, patient as stone. They build an amphitheater too, the Arènes de Lutèce, it will eventually be called. A curved space where people gather to watch, to be entertained, to be part of a crowd. Even then, people needed that. The feeling of sitting close to strangers, all looking in the same direction. Lutetia is not the most important Roman city in Gaul. That would be Lyon, further south, warmer, more established. Lutetia is smaller, quieter, a provincial town on a northern river. But it is growing, slowly, steadily, the way all lasting things grow. And the river is always there, moving past the new stone buildings, past the forum and the baths and the grid of streets, just as it moved past the Parisi's wooden homes before them, unhurried, carrying everything gently forward. You can hear it now if you listen, beneath the imagined sounds of sandals on stone and market voices, and the low murmur of a city finding its shape. Just water, moving past, carrying the past on its surface, and the future somewhere beneath. The mist is beginning to lift, and Lutetia is, quietly, becoming itself. There is a smell in the air here that you cannot quite name at first. It is something between wet stone and warm earth, something that rises from the ground itself, as if the soil beneath your feet is breathing. You stand very still and let it come to you. A faint trace of wood smoke, a deeper note of river mud from the Seine, carried on a slow wind. And underneath all of it, something older, something that has been here long before the roads, long before the walls. The mosaic tile you felt beneath your foot just a moment ago, that small, cool, finished thing, it already feels like it belongs to another world, because the world is changing now. Quietly. The way light changes in a room when someone opens a door in another part of the house. It is somewhere in the 4th or 5th century. The Roman city of Lutetia has grown into something a little larger, a little louder. People call it by a different name now. They call it Paris. The name comes from the Parisi, the tribe who were here long before the Romans arrived. The name has stayed, even as everything else has shifted, and things are shifting. You can hear it if you listen carefully. Not a great noise, not a crowd or a fanfare, just the sound of a small group of people gathered in a quiet place. Their voices are low. They are praying. The words are Latin, but the feeling behind them is something new, something that has been traveling west from the far edges of the known world, moving from person to person, city to city, like a flame passed between cupped hands. Christianity has arrived in Paris. The story of how it arrived is told through a man named Denis. You may have heard his name before, or perhaps you have not. He was a bishop, sent from Rome to bring this new faith to the people of Gaul. He came to Lutetia, to this island in the river, and he began to speak. He gathered people around him. He baptized them in the cold water of the Seine. You can almost feel that water if you think about it. The shock of it against the skin, the gasp of breath, the strange feeling of being changed by something as simple as cold water and a spoken word. Denis was not welcomed by everyone. The old ways did not give up their ground easily. He was arrested. He was taken to the hill north of the city, the hill that people would one day call Montmartre. And there, the story says, he was killed. But the story does not end there, because the story of Denis is also a story about what happens after, what people remember, what they choose to carry forward. They buried him north of the city, and over the years, a small shrine grew around that place. Then a chapel, then something larger. The ground where he was laid to rest became sacred ground, and sacred ground has a way of pulling people toward it, slowly, across centuries, the way a river pulls water from the hills. You breathe in again. The smell of wet stone is still there. But now you notice something else. Beeswax. The faint, sweet smell of candles burning somewhere nearby. It is a smell that will become very familiar in this city over the coming centuries. The smell of small flames held against the dark. And then there is Clovis. He comes a little later, near the end of the 5th century. He is a Frankish king, strong and practical, the kind of man who thinks in terms of armies and alliances. But his wife, Clotilde, is a Christian, and she speaks to him. She prays for him, and one day, in the middle of a battle he fears he is losing, he makes a promise. He wins the battle. He keeps the promise. In the year 4096, or somewhere close to it, the exact date is debated, Clovis is baptized. The bishop pours water over him. The words are spoken, and the king of the Franks becomes a Christian king. It is a small moment in a way. One man, one basin of water, one set of words, but small moments have long shadows. You feel it now, standing here in this city that is still finding its shape. Something has just been decided, something that will take centuries to fully understand. The air is still. The candles are burning, and somewhere beneath your feet, the old stone holds its breath. The stone is cold beneath your fingers, not harshly cold, not the cold of winter wind or river water, just the deep, settled cold of walls that have been standing for a very long time. You press your palm flat against the surface and feel the faint roughness of it. The tiny ridges where one stone meets another, the places where mortar has crumbled just a little at the edges. This wall has been here longer than anyone alive can remember, and it holds that age in its temperature. You are still in the soft half-dark. The candle from before has burned a little lower. Its light still moves, still breathes, still throws those gentle, uncertain shadows across the floor. But your eyes have adjusted now. You can see more than you could before. This is Paris in the years after Rome has loosened its grip. The empire that once held everything together has grown quiet. Its roads are still here. Its bridges still cross the river. But the voice that once commanded from distant capitals has faded to almost nothing. And into that silence, something new has begun to grow. The Franks are here now. The Merovingian kings, and Paris, this small island city on the Seine, has become something they value. Something worth holding. Something worth marking with the weight of their presence. You walk slowly through the early morning. The air smells of river mud and wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, bread is baking in a clay oven. The smell of it is warm and simple and deeply human. It reminds you that even in times of great change, people still wake before dawn. They still tend their fires. They still feed their families. The city is quiet at this hour, but it is not empty. On the left bank of the river, where the old Roman streets still hold their shape, something is being built, or rather, something has already been built, and is now slowly becoming more than it was. A monastery. Low stone buildings arranged around a small courtyard, a garden where herbs grow in careful rows, rosemary, sage, plants whose names you might not know, but whose smell you recognize, clean and green and faintly sharp on the morning air. The monks who live here rise before the sun. You can hear them now, if you listen carefully, a low chant drifting through a narrow window, soft and unhurried. The sound of voices that have been shaped by years of practice. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply exists, like the river, like the cold in the stones. These early monasteries are small. They are not the grand abbeys that will come later. But they are important in ways that are hard to see from the outside. They are places where knowledge is being kept, where manuscripts are copied by hand, letter by careful letter, where the fragile thread of learning is being held gently through uncertain times. And then there are the burials. The Merovingian kings understood something about the power of where you rest. To be buried in a sacred place was to claim that place, to leave a mark that would last longer than any battle, any treaty, any spoken word. On the northern edge of the city, in a basilica dedicated to Saint Denis, kings and queens were being laid to rest. Their graves were not yet the elaborate monuments they would one day become, but they were deliberate, chosen, meaningful. You think about that as you walk. The idea that a city is shaped not only by the living, but by the dead. By where people chose to be remembered. By the places they marked with their endings. The Seine moves past you, unhurried. A small boat is being pulled upstream by a man with a rope over his shoulder, his feet finding each step carefully on the muddy bank. The water is grey-green in the early light. A duck moves near the far shore, leaving a thin line of ripples behind it. Paris in these centuries is a city between things. Between what it was and what it will become. Between the old Roman order and something newer. Something that hasn't quite found its shape yet. And there is a kind of peace in that. In the not yet decided. In the open space of becoming. You rest for a moment on a low stone wall near the water. The cold comes through your clothing slowly. The chanting from the monastery has faded now. The bread smell is still there, faint and good. The city breathes around you, quietly, steadily, finding its way, one slow morning at a time. There is something faintly bitter on your tongue. Like wood smoke that has drifted in from somewhere far away and settled there, quiet and uninvited. You breathe through it slowly. The evening air still carries that cool touch from the river, that gentle emptiness of the abbey courtyard just a moment ago. But now something is shifting. Something is being added to the world. It is the taste of a new era arriving. You are still in the same place, more or less. The same bend in the river. The same low hills. The same soft dark pressing in at the edges of the sky. But the people moving through this land now carry a different kind of weight with them. A sense of purpose that feels almost architectural. Like they are not just passing through. Like they intend to stay and to build something that will last. The name Charlemagne moves through this time like a slow river current. You do not see him here, not exactly, but you feel the shape of his influence the way you feel warmth from a fire in the next room. It reaches you. It changes the temperature of things. He is building an empire, and empires need places, fixed places, named places, places with walls. You walk along what will become the edge of the first city walls, though right now they are little more than an intention. Timber and earth mostly, rough and honest. You run your fingers along the top of a freshly cut wooden post and feel the rawness of it, the pale exposed wood still slightly damp from the tree it came from not long ago. This is not yet stone. Stone will come later, but this is a beginning. And beginnings have their own kind of dignity. The smell of cut timber is everywhere, that clean, resinous scent that catches at the back of your throat in a pleasant way. Mixed with it is something earthier, turned soil. The workers have been digging foundations, laying down the logic of enclosure, the simple human idea that here is inside, and there is outside, and the difference matters. Around you, the settlement is gathering itself. Small structures cluster together like people sharing warmth. A mill near the water, a market space, already worn smooth by feet, even though it is young. A church that is modest but carefully made, its walls straight, and its doorway facing east toward the morning light. The Carolingian world believes in order, in a careful arrangement of things, in roads that go somewhere, in bridges that hold, in documents that record what belongs to whom. You can feel that belief in the way this place is being laid out. Not haphazardly, intentionally. You hear the low sound of a bell somewhere, not urgent, just marking time. Vespers, perhaps. The monks in their house of prayer, moving through their hours with the same steady rhythm they always have. Their voices rise briefly, a murmur of Latin that you cannot quite make out, and then settle back into the evening. A dog trots past you on some private errand, nose low to the ground. A child calls out from somewhere behind a wall, and then goes quiet again. The taste of wood smoke is still with you. It is the taste of cooking fires, of warmth being made deliberately against the coming dark. Somewhere nearby, something is simmering. Something simple. Grain, perhaps, or dried beans softened in water. The smell of it reaches you a moment later, humble and nourishing. The smell of people feeding themselves and each other at the end of a long day of work. This is what empire looks like from the inside, you think. Not gold and marble. Not yet. It looks like this. Like a wooden post in damp earth. Like a bell marking the hour. Like supper being made. The walls being built here are not grand, but they are real. And they are the first. The very first time this place will say to the world, we are here, we are bounded, we are a place with a name and an edge and a reason. You stand at that edge now, looking out past the timber posts into the open land beyond. The river catches the last pale light and holds it for a moment, silver and still. Inside the walls, a fire brightens. Someone laughs softly. The smell of the evening meal deepens and spreads. You are standing at the very beginning of something. You can feel it, quiet and certain, like a breath held just before a word is spoken. The parchment is still there on the desk. You can see it in the low amber light, the ink slightly faded at the edges, the letters pressed carefully into the skin of the page by someone who wanted the words to last. The candle beside it has burned a little lower. The wax has pooled and hardened into a small white ridge. Nothing has moved. And yet something feels different now, as though the room itself has been listening. Paris in the last years of the 9th century, and into the 10th, is a city that knows what it means to survive. You can feel that knowledge in the stones of the bridges, in the way the walls of the Ile de la Cité seem to lean slightly inward, as if bracing. The Seine moves around the island the way it always has, steady, grey-green, unhurried, but the people who live here have learned to read the river differently. They watch it for ships. They watch it for shadows on the water. The great siege of 85 and 86 is still alive in the memory of the city. The Northmen, the Vikings, had come in their longships, hundreds of them, and they had surrounded Paris for months. You can almost hear it if you let yourself drift. The low sound of drums, the creak of rope and timber, the strange quiet that falls over a city that is waiting. The defenders held the bridges. They held the towers. Count Odo, who led the defense, became something more than a count in those months. He became a name people said with a particular kind of gratitude. The smell of the river is always present here. Damp wood, cold mud, something faintly green and alive beneath it all. On a morning after rain, the whole island smells like the water has come to visit, like the Seine has breathed in and not quite breathed out again. The Vikings did not take Paris. They moved on. They were paid, in the way of those times, to go elsewhere. Silver and permission to raid further upriver. It was not a perfect victory. It was the kind of ending that leaves a complicated feeling in the chest. But Paris stood, and that mattered more than the terms. What followed was a slow shifting of power. The Carolingian kings, the descendants of Charlemagne, were weakening. Not all at once, and not without dignity, but weakening nonetheless. The throne passed between hands. Some kings were capable, some were very young, some were simply not there when they were needed, and into that space, quietly, and then more firmly, came other families, other names. You can touch the edge of that change if you reach for it. It feels like the moment when a door that has always been closed begins, very slowly, to open. Not with a bang, just a soft release of pressure. In 9087, the last Carolingian king died without an heir who could hold things together. The great lords of Francia, the men who controlled the land, the armies, the loyalty of other men, gathered to decide what came next. They chose Hugh Capet. He was already powerful. He was already respected, or at least accepted. And so a new dynasty began, right here, with Paris at its quiet center. The Capetians would rule for centuries. But on that first day, it was just a decision made by tired men in a room. The smell of tallow candles and damp wool around them, the sound of horses outside, the weight of the moment, not yet fully understood by anyone present. Paris did not celebrate loudly. Cities rarely do when history turns. Life continued. Bread was baked. Fish were pulled from the river. Children ran along the narrow lanes of the island. The monks in their scriptoriums kept writing. Someone, somewhere, left a parchment half read on a desk and went to sleep. That is the thing about this city. It holds its history the way the river holds its reflection, clearly, but without clinging. The Vikings came, and the city endured. The kings changed, and the city endured. The bridges were repaired. The walls were mended. The candles were relit, and now the one beside the parchment is very low. Just a small warm point of light in the dark. The words on the page are still there, patient and still, waiting for no one in particular. The river moves outside. The city breathes. You can rest now. The water is still speaking to you. That soft lapping against the wooden piers. You heard it at the edge of sleep. And now it carries you forward, just a little further into the dark and the quiet. The Seine moves the way it always has. Patient, unhurried, older than any king. But something has shifted on its banks. Listen carefully. Beneath the water sounds, beneath the creak of a mooring rope, there is something new. A low murmur from the island at the river's heart. Voices, not many, not loud, but steady, like a fire that has just decided it intends to keep burning. This is the Éle de la Cité in the late years of the 10th century. And the city, this small, quiet city, is about to become something it has never quite been before. His name is Hugh Capet. You can imagine him as a practical man, not a dreamer. He wears his authority the way a craftsman wears a good coat, because it is useful, because it keeps out the cold, because he earned it. In 9087, the great lords of Francia chose him as their king. They chose him partly because he seemed manageable. They would learn, slowly, that they were wrong about that. Hugh made Paris his home. Not just a stopping place, a home. That choice mattered more than it might seem. Kings before him had wandered. They moved between estates and palaces, never settling, never quite belonging to any single place. Hugh looked at this island in the Seine, this small, slightly muddy, slightly cramped island, and he decided, here, this is where the crown will rest. You can almost feel what that decision did to the city. Like a hand pressed gently but firmly to the earth. A stillness. Acclaiming, the royal palace sat on the western end of the island. It was not grand, not yet. Stone walls, yes, but modest ones. Timber in places, floors that were cold underfoot in winter, even through thick wool shoes. The smell of wood smoke never quite left the rooms. Tallow candles made the air slightly heavy, slightly golden, in a way that felt more like a farmhouse than a palace. But it was real. It was permanent. And permanence, in this uncertain age, was its own kind of power. Around the palace, the island filled in slowly. Craftsmen came. Merchants came. The church of Notre-Dame, not the great cathedral you might know, but an older, smaller building on the same sacred ground, drew pilgrims and priests. You can imagine the sound of a handbell ringing for morning prayers, thin and clear in the cold air, carrying out over the water and dissolving into mist. The city on the right bank was growing too, slowly, carefully. Traders set up along the river's edge. The smell of fish and fresh bread and river mud mixed together in the mornings. Children ran between market stalls. Somewhere, always, a hammer was striking something. Wood, iron, stone, the sound of a place building itself. This was not yet a great capital, not in the way that word would one day mean. There were no wide avenues, no grand monuments, no crowds that stretched beyond sight. Paris in the year 1000 was still a small and humble thing. You could walk across the island in a few quiet minutes. You could stand at the riverbank and hear the birds in the willows on the far shore. But the Capetian kings kept coming back, father to son, generation to generation. They returned to this island. They added to the palace. They built churches. They granted rights to merchants and monks. They made the city feel, slowly, like the center of something. And the city responded, the way a plant responds to a hand that waters it regularly. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just a little more green each season. A little more reach. You are resting now on the edge of all that slow becoming. The Seine is still moving below you, carrying its dark water toward the sea. The island sits in the middle of it, small and sure of itself in the way that only very old, very rooted things can be. A dog barks somewhere across the water, then silence again. The candles in the palace have burned low. The king is asleep. The city is asleep, but something in it, something quiet and determined, is just beginning to wake. The air carries something old and mineral this morning. Stone dust, faintly damp. It settles at the back of your throat like a quiet reminder that something enormous is being built just a few streets away. You breathe it in slowly. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of a city becoming something it has never been before. The bell has faded now. Its single tone still seems to hang somewhere just above the rooftops, dissolving into the grey morning light. And Paris is waking around it, gently, without hurry. You can hear the river first. The Seine moves beneath its wooden bridges with a low, patient sound. Then the birds. Then the soft knock of a shutter being pushed open somewhere above you. The city does not leap into the day. It eases into it, the way a person eases into a warm room after a long walk in the cold. And there is so much to ease into in this century. The ground beneath your feet is uneven here on the Ile de la Cité. The old stones are worn smooth in the middle where feet have passed for generations. You feel the slight dip and rise of them through the soles of your shoes. It is a small thing, but it tells you something. People have been walking this path for a very long time, and now they are walking it towards something new. The Cathedral of Notre-Dame is not yet what it will become. The foundation work has begun, but slowly, carefully. Bishop Maurice de Sully has set the vision in motion. A church so large, so full of light, that the people of Paris will feel something shift inside them just by standing near it. The old cathedral that stood here before is being cleared away, stone by stone. What replaces it will take generations to finish. But the beginning is here. You can feel it in the air, in the dust. You pass a group of workers resting near a low wall. One of them is eating bread, tearing it slowly, chewing without looking up. Another has his eyes closed, face tilted toward a pale patch of winter sun. They are tired. This work is heavy and slow and cold. But there is something in the way they sit together, easy and unhurried, that feels like a kind of quiet pride. Not far from here, on the left bank of the river, something else is taking shape. Something less visible, but just as lasting. Scholars have been gathering in Paris for decades now. Teachers and students, drawn by the reputation of the cathedral school, by the presence of thinkers like Peter Abelard, whose ideas were sharp and restless, and sometimes troubling to those in power. The conversations happening in small rooms and open courtyards are becoming something more organized, more formal. The loose collection of teachers and students is slowly, almost without anyone deciding it all at once, becoming what will one day be called a university. You imagine those rooms, low ceilings, tallow candles burning with a faint, fatty smell. A teacher speaking in Latin, his voice measured and careful. Students writing quickly, their fingers stained with ink that never quite washes out. Outside, the sound of the river. Inside, the sound of ideas being tested, questioned, turned over like stones to see what lives beneath. It is not comfortable, exactly. The benches are hard. The rooms are cold. The arguments go on longer than anyone planned. But there is something alive in those rooms, something that will not stop. You sit for a moment on a low step near the water. The Seine moves past you, dark and slow. A boat is being unloaded nearby, sacks of grain, heavy and swaying. The men working it speak in low voices. One of them laughs at something, a short, warm sound that disappears quickly into the morning. You think about what this century is holding. A cathedral rising from old ground, a place of learning finding its shape. A city that is not yet sure how large it will become, but is leaning forward anyway, reaching towards something. The stone dust is still there in the air. You breathe it in one more time. There is something reassuring about it, about the fact that great things begin this slowly, with cold mornings and tired workers and scholars arguing in candlelit rooms, with one bell tolling once, and then going quiet. The river keeps moving, the city keeps leaning forward, and you let yourself settle into the stillness of this long, patient morning, feeling the cool stone beneath you, and the slow weight of a century just beginning to understand itself. The stone is cool beneath your fingers. You reach out and touch the wall, this new wall, freshly cut and fitted, still holding the cold of the quarry somewhere deep inside it. The surface is rough in places, smooth in others, where a mason's tool passed carefully along the edge. You can feel the weight of it even just standing close, the solidity of it, the intention. This is Paris in the early years of the 13th century. And something has changed. Not long ago, the city had no real boundary. It spread and wandered, soft at the edges, bleeding into fields and marshland and the slow bend of the river. But now there is a wall. A proper wall, one that says, here is the city. Here is where it begins, and here is where it ends. King Philip Augustus, they called him, ordered it built before he left for the Crusades. He didn't want to come home to a city that had simply drifted apart in his absence. He wanted Paris to hold its shape, to become something permanent, and so the stones were cut, and the mortar was mixed, and slowly, over years, the wall rose. You walk along the inside of it now, in the early morning. The air is still cool. There is dew on the grass near the base of the wall, and your shoes are damp from it. Above you, the sky is pale and soft, not quite blue yet, somewhere between night and day. A bird calls once, then goes quiet. The wall runs for miles. It circles the right bank, the northern side of the river, where the merchants are, where the markets breathe and bustle and smell of river fish and fresh bread and the sharp edge of tanned leather. And it circles the left bank too, where the scholars gather, where Latin drifts out of open windows in the afternoon, where ink and argument fill the narrow lanes. 2 banks, 1 wall, 1 city. That is the idea anyway. You turn away from the wall and walk toward the market. Even at this hour, it is already waking. The great market at Les Halles, not yet the grand structure it will one day become, but already a place of serious commerce, already a place where the city feeds itself and measures itself and argues over prices in the grey morning light. A cart rolls past you, heavy with cabbages. The wooden wheels grind against the uneven ground. The man pulling it doesn't look up. He has somewhere to be. You step aside and let him pass. The smell reaches you before the stalls do. Onions. Something smoky. The faint sweetness of apples stored too long. And underneath it all, the river, always the river, threading through everything. A cool, damp presence you feel more than smell. Philip had thought about all of this. Not just the walls, but the markets too. He wanted to know where the money was moving. He wanted records. He wanted officials who answered to him, not just to local lords or ancient custom. He was building something more than stone. He was building a system. You pick up an apple from a stall and turn it in your hand. The skin is waxy, slightly soft at one side. The vendor watches you with calm eyes. You put it back gently. Across the market, 2 men are in quiet disagreement over a bolt of cloth. Their voices are low but firm. One gestures at the fabric. The other shakes his head. This is how the city works, in small negotiations, in the back and forth of ordinary days, in the slow accumulation of trades and agreements and small decisions made before the sun is fully up. And somewhere behind all of it, the king's administration is watching, taking note, keeping order. You think about the wall again. How it must have felt to the people of Paris when it was being built. To watch the stones rise day by day, to understand, slowly, that the city was being defined. Given edges, given shape. A city with walls is a city that knows what it is, and Paris, in these years, is beginning to know. The market fills around you, more carts, more voices, the clatter of wooden crates, and the soft thud of sacks set down on the ground. The light is growing now, pale gold, beginning to touch the rooftops. You stand in the middle of it all and feel the city gathering itself, breathing in, holding something new. There is something almost sweet in the air tonight, a faint dryness on your lips, like chalk dust and cool water mixed together. The taste of stone, of work nearly finished. You breathe it in slowly, and it settles at the back of your throat like a quiet promise. The mason has set down his tools. The wall is done, and that single stone, still holding a little of the day's warmth, is now part of something that will stand for centuries. You are standing at the edge of the Îlot de la Cité in the second half of the 13th century, and Notre-Dame de Paris is almost complete. Almost. But almost is a beautiful place to be. The great cathedral has been rising for nearly 100 years. Generations of hands have shaped it, fathers and sons. Grandfathers who never saw the towers finished, and yet here it stands, enormous and quiet against the pale evening sky. Its two western towers reaching upward with a kind of patient confidence. You walk a little closer. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, worn smooth in some places, rough in others. You can feel the difference through the soles of your shoes. The older sections, laid down long ago, have a softness to them now. The newer stone is still sharp at the edges. Inside, if you were to step through the great doors, the light would fall in long colored ribbons through the rose windows. The north rose window was completed around this time, and it is extraordinary. Deep blues and reds and golds, arranged in a great circle, telling stories in glass and light. You would tilt your head back and simply look, and the looking would take a very long time. The smell inside is cool and mineral. Stone and candle wax and something older underneath, like earth that has never quite dried out. The river is close. It is always close here. The Seine wraps around this island like a gentle hand, and its dampness finds its way into everything. Paris in these decades is not only a city of stone, it is a city of ideas. The university on the left bank, across the river, is drawing scholars from across Europe. Young men arrive with ink-stained fingers and heavy satchels, speaking Latin to one another in the narrow streets. They argue about theology, about philosophy, about the nature of light, and the movement of the stars. Thomas Aquinas taught here during this period. You might have passed him on a bridge, a large quiet man, deep in thought, barely noticing the carts and the noise around him. His ideas about reason and faith were reshaping how people understood the world. And the cathedral rising behind him was, in its own way, doing the same thing. It was an argument made in stone, a way of saying, look how high we can reach. Look what human hands can build when they are guided by something larger than themselves. You sit down for a moment on a low step near the cathedral's south side. The evening is cooling quickly. You can feel it on your forearms, that particular chill that comes just after the sun has gone, but before the dark fully settles. Someone nearby is selling bread, and the warm, yeasty smell drifts past you and disappears. A bell sounds from somewhere inside the cathedral, low and round. It spreads outward across the rooftops and the water and the evening air. You feel it more than hear it. A gentle vibration in your chest. The city around you is growing. Streets are filling in. Markets are spreading. The population of Paris is rising steadily through these decades, and the island and the banks around it are becoming dense with life. Bakers and butchers, and scribes and students and pilgrims and merchants, all of them moving through the same narrow streets, breathing the same river air. But the cathedral holds something still, even now, with the scaffolding coming down piece by piece, with the last details being carved and fitted into place. It holds a kind of stillness at its center, a hush. You look up at the towers one more time before the light goes completely. They are not decorated at the very top the way the original plans imagined. The spire that was once planned for the crossing was never built in this era. But the towers themselves are enough. More than enough. They rise, and the city rises with them. And somewhere in the stone, still faintly warm from a mason's long day of work, a century of effort rests quietly. Settled. Finished enough. The bell fades. The river moves. And Paris breathes slowly into the night. The torches along the cathedral wall burn low. You watch the last flame shiver in the evening air, then settle into a steady, quiet glow. The stone around it looks almost warm in that light, pale gold, like old honey. The scaffolding stands still now. The workers have gone home. The tools are put away. And Paris breathes out slowly into the dark. It is the early 1300s, and the city feels full of people, full of noise during the day, full of ambition carved into every arch and doorway. The streets are crowded in ways that would surprise you. Narrow lanes press close together. Wooden houses lean toward each other overhead, almost touching. You can walk through certain quarters and barely see the sky, and then something changes. It does not come all at once. It arrives the way cold air arrives before a storm, quietly, at the edges, before you quite understand what it is. The plague reaches France in 1348. You may have heard the name before, the Black Death. But hearing a name and understanding what it meant are very different things. Stand here in the city, in the middle of the 14th century, and try to feel it. Not the fear, that comes later. First, there is just a strange stillness. A market stall left unattended. A door that stays closed longer than it should. The smell is the first thing that tells you something is truly wrong. It drifts through the streets. Something heavy and close. Something that makes you pull your cloak tighter even on a mild day. People begin to burn herbs in their doorways. Rosemary, juniper, whatever they have. The smoke curls up into the alleyways and mixes with the smell of bread and river water and animals. It is meant to clean the air. It does not clean the air. Paris loses a great portion of its people in these years. Historians estimate that between a third and half of the city's population dies. Those numbers are difficult to hold in your mind. So instead, think of the smaller things. The baker who is no longer at his corner. The sound of a bell that rings more often than it used to. The way the streets, which were so crowded just a few years before, begin to feel wide and strange and quiet. The Seine still moves. You can stand on the bank and watch it, and it looks exactly as it always has. Grey-green, unhurried, carrying its reflections downstream. The river does not know what is happening. That is both comforting and a little unsettling. And yet, and this is the thing that stays with you, the city does not stop. People keep working. They keep trading. They keep building, though more slowly now. The Cathedral of Notre-Dame, still unfinished in places, still stands. The university continues, though its halls are quieter. The bread still gets made. The boats still come in from upstream, heavy with grain and wine and firewood. There is something in this that is hard to name. Not courage exactly, not stubbornness either. Something quieter than both. A kind of continuing, a choice, or maybe not even a choice, just an instinct to keep going when everything feels uncertain. The 100 Years' War is also pressing on France during this century. England and France are in a long, grinding conflict over land and power, and the question of who has the right to rule. Battles are fought in the countryside. Towns are disrupted. Trade routes become uncertain. Taxes rise to pay for soldiers and supplies. In Paris, you feel the weight of it in small ways, in the cost of a loaf of bread, in the worried conversations at the market, in the way people speak more carefully about certain things. And then there are the revolts. In 1358, the peasants of the countryside rise up in what becomes known as the Jacquerie, a violent, desperate uprising born from years of suffering. In Paris itself, a merchant leader named Etienne Marcel challenges royal authority in ways that shake the city's sense of order. These are not small moments. They are signs that something underneath ordinary life is shifting. But tonight, standing here in the soft torchlight, the cathedral walls still warm from the day's sun, you do not need to hold all of that at once. You just need to notice that the city is still here, still breathing, still lit, however faintly, against the dark. Something is being held quietly in the middle of all this difficulty. And you are just beginning to understand what that something is. You can hear the wind moving through the city tonight. It comes in slow, uneven gusts. It catches on the rooftops and the broken edges of walls. It moves through the narrow streets, the way water moves through old stone, finding every gap, every hollow, every place where something used to be and isn't anymore. And somewhere above you, on a rampart that no one tends anymore, a banner is still fluttering, half mended. Threads loose at one corner. It makes a soft, irregular sound, a whisper, and then a snap, and then a whisper again. Like something trying to speak, like something not quite ready to be silent. You stay with that sound for a moment. Paris in the early 15th century is a city that has learned to wait. It has been waiting for a long time now. The English have been here since 1420, when the Treaty of Troyes handed the city, handed all of France, in a way, to a foreign crown. The streets still look like Paris. The bread still smells like Paris, warm and faintly sour from the ovens that start their work before dawn. But something underneath has shifted. Something in the way people move. Careful, measured. Eyes that glance sideways before speaking. You walk through the market in the early morning. The cobblestones are cold under your feet, still damp from the night. Vendors are setting out their goods, root vegetables, dried herbs, a few small wheels of pale cheese. The smells are earthy and close. Someone nearby is frying something in a pan, and the fat sizzles and spits, and for a moment it smells almost festive, almost like a different time. But the soldiers are there too. English voices in the crowd. Not unkind, not cruel in this particular moment, just present. Just a reminder of who holds the gates, who collects the taxes, whose king sits on the throne in the documents that matter. Most people in Paris during these years are simply trying to live. That is not a small thing. There is hunger in the city. There has been plague. There have been winters that arrived early and stayed too long. The ordinary work of surviving takes most of what a person has. And yet, there are whispers. There have been whispers since 1429, when a young woman from the east, from a village most Parisians had never heard of, led French forces to break the siege at Orléans. You may have heard her name by now, even here in occupied Paris. Joan. The maid. The news travelled in pieces, in fragments, the way news always travels in uncertain times. A merchant who passed through, a pilgrim, a soldier who changed sides and changed his story 3 times before settling on something close to the truth. She came to Paris too, in September of 1429. She was wounded at the city's walls. The assault failed, and then, not long after, she was captured, and then she was gone. But the feeling she left behind, that is harder to capture and harder to extinguish. It moves through the city, the way the wind moves tonight. You can't quite hold it, but you can feel it. You run your fingers along a wall near the old market. The stone is rough and slightly gritty under your touch. Someone has scratched something into it. Just a mark. Just a small shape. You're not sure what it means. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The English occupation will not last forever. Even now, in these quiet years of the 1430s and 1440s, the balance is slowly shifting. French forces are gaining ground in the countryside. Alliances are fraying. The Duke of Burgundy, who had once stood with the English, is beginning to reconsider. In 1436, Paris will return to French hands, quietly, without the great dramatic battle you might imagine. More like a door opening than a wall falling. But that is still ahead of you tonight. Tonight, you are here in the occupied city, in the dark, listening to the wind and the flutter of that half-mended banner. The bread is baking somewhere. The cobblestones are cold. A candle burns in a window across the narrow street, and the light it throws is small and steady and warm. Cities survive long nights like this one. They hold their shape even when everything above the surface changes. The stones remember. The streets remember. And slowly, in the way that slow things are sometimes the most certain things, morning comes. There is a smell in the air tonight that does not quite belong to the street. It drifts from somewhere behind a stone wall. Something warm and resinous, a little like pine sap, a little like something burning very slowly and very carefully. You pause on the cobblestones. The last footsteps have faded now, swallowed by the quiet of the lane. And this smell, it pulls at you gently, the way a half-remembered thing does. It is the smell of linseed oil and pigment, of fresh plaster, still damp, of a workshop that never fully sleeps. You are in the Loire Valley now. The river moves somewhere nearby, wide and pale and unhurried. The year is somewhere in the early 16th century, and France is changing. Not loudly, not all at once, but you can feel it in the air, the way you feel a season turning, a softness where there used to be stone. A king has been dreaming. His name is Francis I, and he has come back from Italy with his eyes full of something he cannot stop thinking about. Light, perhaps, or proportion, or the particular way a painted figure seems to breathe, even though it is only pigment on a wall. He has seen what artists can do in Florence, in Milan, in the courts of the Italian peninsula. And he wants that here. He wants that for France, so he invites them, one by one, and sometimes in small quiet groups. Italian painters and sculptors and architects begin to make the journey north. They bring their tools wrapped in cloth. They bring their notebooks covered in small, precise drawings. They bring a way of seeing that is new to this part of the world, or not entirely new, but sharper now, more refined, like a blade that has been carefully sharpened over many generations. You walk a little further along the lane. The stone walls on either side are cool under your fingertips, rough in places, smooth in others, where hands have touched them many times before yours. Above you, the sky is that deep, soft blue that comes just after the last of the light has gone. A window is open somewhere above. You can hear the faint scratch of a quill. Or perhaps it is a stylus on paper. Someone is working late. Someone is always working late in a court like this. The chateaux of the Loire are being rebuilt and reimagined during these years. Old medieval towers are softened with new decorative detail. Staircases spiral upward in ways that are meant to be beautiful, not just functional. Ceilings are painted. Walls are hung with tapestries that tell stories in thread and color. Every surface becomes a kind of conversation between the old world and the new. And at the center of all of it, this restless, generous, endlessly curious king. Francis speaks Italian. He learns it, practices it, uses it to talk directly with the artists he brings to his court. There is something touching about that. A king who wants to understand, not just to own. Who wants to sit close to the work and feel what it means. One of the men he invites is very old by the time he arrives. His beard is long and white. His hands are still. He does not paint much anymore, but he brings his notebooks, thousands of pages of drawings and observations and questions about the world. He brings a mind that has spent a lifetime looking at everything: water, birds, the curve of a human shoulder, the way light falls through leaves. He lives quietly in a small manor house near Amboise. He walks in the gardens. He watches the river. You think about that for a moment. The greatest mind of the age, walking slowly through a French garden in the early morning. The dew still on the grass. The smell of the river in the air. Just thinking, there is something very peaceful about that image. The scratch of the quill above you has stopped. The window is still open, but the room beyond it is dark now. Someone has set down their work for the night. The smell of linseed oil is fainter now, or perhaps you have simply grown used to it. It is part of the air here, part of what this place is becoming. You rest your hand against the cool stone wall for just a moment. Something is being made here. Something careful and slow and full of wonder, and it is only just beginning. The paint is still slightly tacky under your fingertips. Just barely. That thin, almost dry surface that gives a little when you press it, then holds. You pull your hand back gently. The canvas stays still in the window frame, catching the last of the afternoon light. The city below is quiet for now. But that quiet has a weight to it. It has learned to be careful. This is Lyon in the second half of the 16th century, and the city is holding its breath in a way that has become familiar. Not peaceful, just practiced. France is tearing itself apart. Slowly, then suddenly, then slowly again. The wars of religion have been burning through the country for decades now. 8 separate conflicts, one bleeding into the next, like ink spreading through wet paper. On one side, the Catholic majority. On the other, the Huguenots, French Protestants, who follow the Reformed faith of Calvin. Lyon sits between them in more ways than one. The city has always been a place of movement. Merchants, printers, silk workers, bankers, people passing through, ideas passing through. And so the Reformed faith arrived here early, carried in pockets and saddlebags alongside letters and ledgers. By the middle of the century, a significant part of Lyon's population had quietly, then not so quietly, turned Protestant. You can imagine what that felt like inside a household. A family at a dinner table, the smell of bread and candle smoke in the air, speaking in low voices about which church they would attend, or whether they would attend at all. Neighbors who had known each other for years, suddenly uncertain. The texture of daily life had changed, not always violently. Sometimes just differently. A coolness in a handshake, a pause before a greeting. But there were moments of real violence too. In 1562, just as the First War began, Lyon was briefly seized by Huguenot forces. Churches were damaged. Statues were pulled down. The sound of stone hitting stone. The smell of cold ash. Then the city returned to Catholic control, and the fear simply changed direction. The worst moment came a decade later. In August of 1572, news arrived from Paris of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Thousands of Huguenots killed in the capital. and the violence spread outward, city by city. Lyon waited. Then, a few days later, it happened here too. Hundreds of Protestants were killed in the streets and in the prisons. The Saône ran dark. It is one of the most painful chapters in the city's long memory. After that, the city drew inward. The silk looms still turned. The river still carried its boats. But something had shifted in the way people moved through the streets, more carefully, more quietly, with one eye always slightly open. The wars continued for another 2 decades. France exhausted itself. Leaders rose and fell. Alliances shifted. And then, slowly, something changed. Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince, converted to Catholicism to take the French throne as Henry IV. It was a pragmatic choice, a survival choice. Paris, he reportedly said, is worth a mass. And in 1598, he signed the Edict of Nantes. You can almost feel the moment it arrived in Lyon. A document. Paper and ink. Official seals pressed into warm wax. It granted the Huguenots significant rights: the right to worship, the right to hold public office, the right to exist without constant fear. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't equality. But it was something that France had not managed for nearly 40 years. A pause. A breath let out. The city didn't transform overnight. Old wounds don't close that quickly. But something in the air shifted. The way a room feels different when a door is finally opened after being shut too long. A little cooler, a little fresher. The tension's still there, but no longer the only thing you could feel. Back in that palace window, the canvas has dried completely now. The paint no longer gives when you touch it. It is set, fixed. Whatever was painted there, a face, a landscape, a scene from a life, it will hold its shape now. It will last. Lyon has lasted too, through fracture and fear and grief and exhaustion. Through the long, slow work of learning to live alongside difference. The city is still here, still moving, still breathing. The river still carries everything gently southward, unhurried, as it always has. And the evening settles over the rooftops like something soft, like rest, finally, beginning to arrive. There is something on your tongue tonight, something faintly bitter, like the last of a cold herb tea left too long in the cup. It is the taste of a city still learning what peace actually means. The wars of religion have quieted, yes. The streets of Paris are no longer split open by faction and fury. But peace, you are beginning to understand, does not always taste sweet. Sometimes it tastes like waiting, like something unfinished. You are standing on those rain-washed cobblestones, the ones still gleaming from last night's shower. The first pale light of morning is touching them gently, and the city around you is breathing again, slowly, carefully, like someone who has been ill for a long time and is only now sitting up in bed. It is the early years of the 17th century. Henry IV has brought France back from the edge. But Henry will not live forever, and already, in the corridors and antechambers of power, something new is beginning to stir. Something patient and precise and very, very deliberate. You do not see him yet, but you will. For now, walk a little. Feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, uneven, still damp, cool through the soles of your shoes. The city smells of wet stone and wood smoke, and the faint green smell of the Seine in early morning. A baker somewhere nearby has already lit his oven. You catch the warm, flowery breath of it drifting down a narrow alley, and for a moment the city feels almost tender. Paris in these years is a city of perhaps 300,000 souls. It is crowded, loud, and full of ambition. Merchants and lawyers and clergymen and nobles all press against each other in its streets. The great families of France still believe they hold power in their own hands, in their estates, their armies, their ancient rights. They have always done things this way. They expect to go on doing things this way. They do not yet know what is coming. His name is Armand Jean Duplessis. You may know him better as Cardinal Richelieu. He is not a soldier. He is not a king. He is a churchman, thin, precise, with dark, careful eyes that miss very little. He rises slowly through the court of the young Louis XIII, patient as a spider at the edge of its web. By 1624, he is Chief Minister of France. And from that moment, everything begins to change. Richelieu has a vision. It is not a warm or gentle vision. It is a cold, clear, architectural one. He believes that France must be one thing, unified, obedient, powerful, and that anything standing in the way of that unity must be quietly, firmly removed. The great nobles with their private armies, the Protestant strongholds in the south, the foreign powers nibbling at France's borders, one by one, he addresses them all. You can almost feel his influence in the city itself. Paris is changing shape in these years. New buildings rise. The Palais Cardinal, which will later become the Palais Royal, takes form near the Louvre. It is grand and deliberate, a statement in stone. Power, it says, lives here now. Power is organized. Power does not apologize. Walk past the Louvre this morning. Look up at its long, pale facade. The young king is somewhere inside. Louis XIII, serious and often unwell. A man who trusts his minister more than he trusts himself. The two of them make a strange pair. The king who would rather be hunting, and the cardinal who never stops thinking. Inside the city's churches, incense still curls upward in slow grey ribbons. You breathe it in, that ancient smell, resinous and slightly sweet. It has been the smell of French spiritual life for centuries. But Richelieu is not simply a man of the church. He is a man of the state. He holds both things in his hands at once, and he does not confuse them. The nobles are growing uneasy. You can sense it in the way conversations stop when certain names are mentioned, in the way letters are written carefully, with one eye always on who might read them later. France is being gathered in, slowly, methodically, like a net being drawn tight beneath still water. And you are here at the beginning of it, standing in the cool morning air, the taste of that bitter tea still faint on your tongue, watching the light move across the wet stones of Paris. Something is being built, something enormous and invisible. And it is only just beginning. The candle has burned lower now. You can see the small pool of hardened wax around its base, pale and still, like the letter it sealed just moments ago. The room holds that particular quiet that comes after something important has been written and set aside. The words are done. The wax is cool, and Paris, just beyond the shuttered window, breathes slowly in the dark. It is the second half of the 17th century, and the city is changing in ways you can almost see if you stand very still and look carefully enough. Louis XIV has been king for a long time now, longer than most people can quite remember. He came to the throne as a child, and now he is a man in full, certain of himself in the way that only power and time together can make a person certain. He has decided what Paris should look like, and Paris, for the most part, has agreed. You walk out into the city in the early morning. The light is thin and grey, coming in low from the east, and what you notice first is the stone. So much stone. Wide new streets cut through old neighborhoods. Grand facades rise where crooked lanes used to twist and turn. The city feels more ordered than it once did, more deliberate, as if someone has been drawing it on paper first, and then building it second. That is not so far from the truth. The Place des Victoires, the Place Vendôme. These open squares are taking shape now, or have recently been completed. They are not just beautiful spaces, they are statements. They say that the king is watching, that the king has taste, that the city reflects his glory, even when he is not in it. And he is not in it. Not really. Not anymore. Versailles has taken him, that great palace to the southwest, still growing, still being carved and gilded, and planted with geometric gardens that stretch further than the eye can follow. The court has followed him there, the nobles, the ministers, the people who once filled the grand houses of Paris with music and argument, and the smell of expensive perfume. Many of them have gone. You can feel their absence in certain streets. A quietness in the Marais, where some of the finest old hotels particularly stand a little too still. The aristocracy has not abandoned Paris entirely, but its center of gravity has shifted. The king has pulled it westward, out of the city, into his own carefully designed world. Paris, though, does not simply wait. The city has its own life, its own stubbornness. Merchants and craftspeople and writers and priests and servants and students, they are all still here. The streets still smell of bread in the morning and horses in the afternoon. The Seine still moves, grey-green and unhurried, carrying its small boats and its reflections. Children still chase each other across the Pont Neuf. Vendors still call out from their stalls, their voices rough and cheerful. The king may have built his paradise outside the city walls, but the city keeps going without him. There is something quietly interesting in that. Paris has always been too large, too complicated, too alive to be entirely controlled by any single vision. Even a vision as powerful as Louis XIV's, he can shape its squares and its streets. He can draw its fountains and commission its monuments. But the city underneath all of that, the city of ordinary days and ordinary people, that continues in its own way, at its own pace. You find yourself near the river as the morning opens up. The light is warmer now. A soft gold is coming in across the water. You can hear the distant sound of a church bell, low and measured, counting out the hour. Someone nearby is frying something in oil, and the smell drifts past you, simple and good. You think about that letter, sealed and cooling in the room behind you. Letters travel between Paris and Versailles constantly. News, requests, gossip, instructions. The two places are always in conversation, even when they feel so far apart. The king built his palace to be separate from the city, but he could never quite separate himself from it. Paris was always there, waiting, continuing, being itself. And perhaps that is the thing about great cities. They outlast the people who try to define them. They absorb every grand gesture, every monument, every royal ambition, and then they simply carry on. The river moves, the bell fades, the morning settles gently around you, warm and unhurried, like a breath finally let go. The city has gone quiet now, but not completely. Somewhere, a few streets back from the river, you can hear voices. Low ones, the kind that carry through a half-open shutter on a warm evening. A laugh, quickly softened. The scrape of a chair, the clink of a small cup set down on a wooden table. Paris in the early 18th century does not sleep all at once. It dims, slowly, in layers, and in certain rooms, it barely dims at all. You follow the sound. The lanterns along the Seine have faded behind you now. The cobblestones are still damp under your feet from an earlier rain. The air smells of wet stone and wood smoke and something else, something roasted and dark and slightly bitter. Coffee. It drifts out from a doorway just ahead. A warm rectangle of light falls across the street. You step inside. The room is not large. Low ceiling, dark beams, candles on every table. The walls have gone amber with years of smoke and candlelight. Men sit close together, leaning in. Some have papers spread in front of them. Some have nothing at all, just their hands moving as they talk. The coffee arrives in small, handleless cups. You wrap your fingers around one. It is almost too hot. The bitterness touches the back of your throat. This is one of Paris's coffee houses. And in this city, in this century, a coffee house is never just a place to drink coffee. It is a place to think out loud. Paris in the years after 1715 is a city waking up to itself. The long reign of Louis XIV has finally ended. The Sun King, with all his grandeur and his rules and his absolute certainty, is gone. And into the space he leaves behind, something new begins to breathe. Ideas, questions, the gentle, persistent pressure of people asking, why does it have to be this way? The philosophers of this era have a word for what they are doing. They call it the Enlightenment. Lumières, in French. Lights. Small ones, at first. The kind you find in a coffee house at midnight. You look around the room. You do not know these faces. But you know the feeling in the air. It is the feeling of people who have found each other. People who are tired of being told what to think and have started, very carefully, very quietly, to think for themselves. The conversation moves. It touches on the nature of government, on the church, on whether a king truly rules by divine right, or whether that is simply a story told to keep people still. These are not safe questions. Everyone in this room knows that, and yet they keep asking them. The candle on your table flickers. Someone near the window shifts in their seat and the floorboard creaks. Outside, the city carries on its slow midnight breathing. In the decades to come, these conversations will move. They will find their way into the salons, the drawing rooms of certain remarkable women who open their homes once a week, or twice, or every evening if the company is good enough. The salonières, they will be called. Women like Marie-Thérèse Rodé-Geffrin, who feeds the philosophers, funds their projects, and keeps the conversation moving with a quiet authority that no one quite questions. A salon on the Rue Saint-Honoré becomes one of the most important rooms in Europe, not because of its furniture, because of who sits in it and what they say. The encyclopedia is born in rooms like these, that great, ambitious project to write down everything that human beings know, to make knowledge available to anyone who can read. Diderot and D'Alembert, and dozens of others, gathering facts and arguments and illustrations, filling volume after volume. It is an act of faith, faith that knowledge, shared freely, can change things. You take another sip of coffee. It has cooled a little now. The bitterness is gentler. Around you, the conversation has softened too. It is late. One man is reading quietly, his finger moving along a line of text. Another is staring at the candle flame. The room smells of coffee and tallow and old wood and something harder to name, the particular warmth of minds that have been working. Paris is building something in these years, not with stone, with words. with questions asked in low voices over small cups in candlelit rooms. And somewhere in the city tonight, in a salon you have not yet found, someone is asking a question that no one has quite dared to ask before. You wonder what it is. The smell of old paper is still with you. It clings to the air, that dry, faintly sweet scent of ink and dust and time. You breathe it in slowly. Around you, Paris hums with something that feels almost like held breath. The year is moving towards 1789, and the city, this ancient, layered, beautiful city, is beginning to tremble at its edges. Not loudly, not yet, but you can feel it, the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. Something shifting beneath the cobblestones. The streets of Paris in these years are crowded and close. The smell changes as you move through them, from the musty warmth of the bakery doorway, bread just pulled from the oven, to the sharp bite of animal dung and river mud near the Seine. The city holds all of it together, the beautiful and the difficult, the grand and the forgotten. And the people. There are so many people. Workers, traders, mothers with baskets, men in warm coats arguing in low voices near cafe tables. You catch a word here and there. Pain, bread, impulse, taxes. Leroy, the king, Louis XVI sits at Versailles, that glittering palace outside the city. He is not a cruel man, most historians will later say, but he is a distant one. And Paris is hungry, not just for food, though that too. Harvests have been poor, bread prices have climbed until ordinary families must spend most of what they earn just to eat. There is a bitterness in the air that no amount of candlelight or palace gold can sweeten. In the summer of 1789, it breaks open. You are standing near the Bastille, an old fortress, a prison, more symbol than threat by this point. But symbols matter enormously. On the 14th of July, a crowd gathers. You can hear them before you see them. A low roar that grows and grows, feet on stone, voices rising. The air smells of gunpowder and sweat, and something electric, something that has no name, but that every person present can feel on their skin. The Bastille falls that afternoon. It holds only 7 prisoners when it does. But that is almost beside the point. What falls is the idea that the old order cannot be touched. What rises in its place is something terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. The revolution has begun. In the years that follow, Paris becomes a city that is remaking itself, violently, frantically, with great idealism and great cruelty running side by side. The Declaration of the Rights of Man is written. The king is brought from Versailles to Paris, the royal family walking through crowds that press close and watch with unreadable faces. And then the terror comes. You do not linger long in those years. They are heavy. The guillotine stands in what is now the Place de la Révolution, and the sound of the city changes, quieter in some ways, more careful. People speak in lower voices. Neighbors watch neighbors. Thousands die, accused of being enemies of the new republic. Robespierre, who helped build the terror, eventually falls to it himself in the summer of 1794. It is a strange and sorrowful chapter, even now, even at this distance. After the terror, something called the Directory takes hold. 5 men trying to govern a country that is exhausted and fractured. It is unstable. It is corrupt in places. But it is also a pause, a moment where Paris begins, slowly, to breathe again. Cafes reopen. Music returns to the streets. You can smell coffee again, real coffee, warming in small cups, and hear laughter, cautious laughter. but laughter nonetheless. Women in new fashions walk the boulevards. Artists begin to work again. The city, as it always does, finds a way to keep living. What you carry from these years is not just the drama of it. It is something quieter. It is the image of ordinary people, bakers, seamstresses, students, street sellers, caught up in forces larger than themselves, trying to understand what freedom means, what fairness means, what a city and a country owe to the people who live inside them. Those questions are not fully answered in 1799. They are not fully answered now. But they are asked here, in Paris, with great force and great cost. And the city remembers, in its stones, in its street names, in the quiet weight of its history. You settle into that thought now gently. Let it rest with you as the night deepens. The air still carries a faint coolness on your skin. That particular coolness that comes after tension has passed, after something large has moved through and gone quiet again. You stand at the edge of the city, and Paris breathes around you like a sleeping animal, enormous and warm and uncertain of what comes next. It is the very end of one century and the beginning of another, and a man has arrived. You feel it before you understand it. A kind of pressure in the city itself, the way the stones of the streets seem to settle differently, the way people walk with a little more purpose, a little more caution. Something has changed in the air of Paris, and the change has a name. Napoleon Bonaparte. He is not a tall man. You might pass him in a corridor and not notice him immediately. But when he speaks, the room rearranges itself around his voice. And now, the city is beginning to rearrange itself around his vision. He looks at Paris, and he sees something unfinished. He sees narrow medieval streets where grand avenues should be. He sees a city that does not yet look like the capital of an empire. And so he begins to build. You walk along the Seine in the early morning. The water is grey and slow and smells faintly of mud and cold iron. On the banks, you can hear the sound of construction already beginning. Stone being cut, hammers finding their rhythm. The city is always making noise now, always becoming something slightly different from what it was yesterday. Napoleon wants monuments, not for vanity alone, though there is vanity in it, of course, but because he understands something about stone. Stone tells people where they are. Stone says, this place matters. This city is the center of something real. And so the Arc de Triomphe begins to rise at the top of the Champs-Élysées. Not quickly. These things take time, and Napoleon knows it. He lays the foundation and trusts that the arch will outlast him. You can stand near the construction site and feel the dust settle on your arms, pale and fine as flour. Workers move around you in the early light, their breath visible in the cold air, their voices low and practical. Across the city, the column in the Place Vendôme is being raised. It is made from the bronze of cannons captured at Austerlitz. You can almost feel the weight of that history in the metal, all those battles compressed into something vertical and still. At the top, a figure looks out over Paris. The city below is small from up there, orderly, manageable. That is what Napoleon wants. Order. He is not only building monuments, he is reorganizing everything beneath them. The administration of Paris is being reshaped. Streets are being numbered. Hospitals are being reformed. A new legal code is being written, the Napoleonic Code, that will eventually reach far beyond France. You can imagine the clerks bent over their papers in candlelight, the scratch of quill on parchment, the smell of ink and tallow, law being made sentence by careful sentence. New bridges are being built across the Seine. The Pont des Arts opens, and for the first time in Paris, A bridge is made for people on foot, not for horses, not for carriages, just for walking. You step onto it and feel the slight give of the wooden planks beneath your feet. The river moves below you, unhurried. On either bank, the city continues its work. Markets are being organized. Water is being brought into the city more reliably. Fountains are being built so that ordinary Parisians can drink without walking too far. Small things. Practical things. The kind of things that make a city livable rather than merely impressive. And yet the impression is always there too. Napoleon understands that a city must feel like something. It must make the people who live in it feel that they are part of something larger than themselves. You taste the bread from a bakery near the river. It is dense and slightly sour, the crust crackling between your fingers. Around you, the morning market is filling with voices and color, cabbages and onions piled in wooden crates. The smell of fish and wet stone, life continuing, as it always does, in the small spaces between the grand designs. Paris in these years is a city being written and rewritten at the same time. The old streets still wind beneath the new ambitions. And somewhere in that tension, something extraordinary is quietly taking shape. You pause on the bridge and listen to the river. The taste of weak coffee lingers on your tongue. Bitter, a little thin. The kind of coffee that Parisians drink standing up, quickly, before the day asks anything of them. You imagine holding a small ceramic cup, still warm in your palm, the rim slightly chipped. Nothing grand. Just the ordinary comfort of morning. And morning, in Paris after 1815, feels like something the city is still learning how to trust. The wars are over. Napoleon is gone, first to Elba, then to St. Helena, that small island far out in the South Atlantic. The Bourbon kings are back. Louis XVIII takes the throne. And then, after him, Charles X. The white flag flies again over the Tuileries. The eagles come down. The imperial symbols are quietly removed, one by one, like furniture being rearranged in a house after a long and difficult guest has finally left. That half-finished arch you were watching, the Arc de Triomphe, it simply waits. Work slows. The bronze laurel wreath cools in someone's workshop. The city breathes, but it breathes carefully. Nobody is quite sure what kind of Paris this is supposed to be now. You walk along the Seine in the early morning light. The river is grey-green and slow. There is the smell of wet stone from the embankment. And somewhere nearby, bread baking. That deep, yeasty warmth that drifts out from a boulangerie before the shutters are even fully open. A cat sits on a low wall and watches you pass. It does not move. It simply watches. The Restoration, they will call this period. But restoration is a strange word. You cannot truly restore a city. You can repaint the walls. You can bring back old names and old titles. But the people who lived through the revolution, through the terror, through 15 years of war, they carry all of that inside them. It does not simply wash away. And so Paris in these years has a particular feeling. Cautious on the surface, restless underneath. The salons are lively again. In the warm lamplight of private drawing rooms, writers and thinkers and artists gather. You can almost hear the low murmur of conversation, the clink of a glass, the rustle of paper. Victor Hugo is young and already writing. Stendhal is watching everything with his cool, precise eye. There is energy here, but it moves quietly, indoors, in whispers and in books. Then 1830 comes, and the whispers get louder. Charles X pushes too hard. He tries to restrict the press, to limit voting rights, to pull France back towards something that feels, to many people, like the old world before the revolution. And Paris does not accept that quietly. In late July, the streets fill. Barricades go up. You can almost feel the rough texture of the cobblestones being pried loose, stacked into walls. 3 days of fighting. 3 days that the French will call les trois glorieuses, the 3 glorious days. Charles flees, and a new king arrives, Louis Philippe, the citizen king, who carries an umbrella instead of a scepter and walks the boulevards like an ordinary man, or tries to. The July monarchy, they call this new era. It is neither the old royalism nor the republic. It is something in between, a compromise, a careful balance, a city holding 2 ideas at once, and hoping neither one tips over. Paris grows during these years. The population swells. New neighborhoods spread outward. The streets are crowded and often filthy, and the Seine carries things you would rather not think about. But there is also building, always building, new bridges, new fountains, the beginnings of what will become a modern city, though nobody quite knows that yet. And the Arc de Triomphe, that patient, half-finished arch, is finally completed in 1836. Napoleon had dreamed it. Louis Philippe finishes it. History in Paris is often like that. One person plants the seed. Someone else entirely gets to stand in the shade. You think about that now, as the morning light softens and the city begins to stir around you. The coffee is long gone, just a faint bitterness at the back of your throat. A barge moves slowly on the river. A bell rings somewhere, distant and unhurried. Paris in these years is a city learning to live with its own contradictions, proud and uncertain, hopeful and tired, building towards something it cannot yet name. And perhaps that is enough for now. To build, to wait, to let the stones slowly warm in the morning sun. You notice it before anything else. A folded newspaper, still resting on the bench where someone left it. The evening light is fading now, that soft grey blue that settles over Paris just before the lamps are lit. The paper hasn't moved. The person who left it is long gone. You lean a little closer. The ink is smudged at the edges, the way newspapers always are in winter. The date reads February 1848. And even from here, even in this quiet park, you can feel something in the air that is different, something that has been building for a long time. Paris in early 1848 is a city holding its breath. The king is Louis Philippe. He has been on the throne for nearly 18 years. In the beginning, people called him the citizen king. He wore a plain coat. He carried an umbrella. He shook hands in the street. It felt like something new, something closer to the people. But years pass, and slowly, quietly, the distance grows. The winters have been hard. Bread is expensive. Work is uncertain. Outside the city, the harvests have failed. Inside the city, the workers in the workshops and the small factories feel the squeeze of every difficult season. They are tired, and they are angry, not loudly, not yet, but the feeling is there, sitting just beneath the surface, the way cold water sits beneath thin ice. The government has tried to keep the lid on. Public meetings are restricted. Political gatherings are banned. So people find another way. They hold banquets, long dinners, with speeches and toasts, where men talk about reform and change and what France could be. It is a small, clever workaround. A meal is not a meeting. A toast is not a protest. but everyone knows what it really is. And then, in late February, the government bans the banquets too. That is the moment the ice cracks. You can almost feel it, the shift in the streets. The way people stop and look at each other. The way a silence becomes something heavier than silence. By the 22nd of February, crowds are gathering near the Place de la Madeleine. They are not violent, not yet. They are just there, present, filling the wide boulevard with their bodies and their breath. The cold is sharp that day. You can feel it on your cheeks, on the backs of your hands. The cobblestones are damp. The gas lamps flicker in the wind, and the crowd grows. By the 23rd, soldiers are in the streets. And then, on that cold February night, something happens on the Boulevard des Capucines. Shots are fired. Dozens of people fall. No one agrees later on exactly how it started, but the result is clear. The bodies of the dead are carried through the streets on carts by torchlight. The city sees them, and the city rises. By morning, the barricades are going up. This is something Paris knows how to do. It has done it before, in 1830, and before that in the Great Revolution of 1789. There is almost a grammar to it, a way of building these walls of stone and wood, and overturned furniture that feels practiced, inherited. Paving stones are pulled from the streets. Carts are dragged sideways. Old doors are leaned against iron railings, and in the narrow streets of the old city, the barricades rise quickly, quietly, with a kind of grim efficiency. You walk through one of those streets now, in your imagination. The smell of wood smoke is in the air. Somewhere nearby, someone is hammering. The sound echoes off the tall stone walls. A woman leans from a window above, watching. A child sits on a step, very still, holding a piece of bread. By the 24th of February, Louis-Philippe abdicates. He leaves quietly, without ceremony, and makes his way to England. The citizen king is gone, and in the courtyard of the Hôtel de Ville, the Second Republic is declared. People pour into the streets. There is singing. There is weeping. There are flags, and among them, some people carry red flags, the color of the workers, the color of a different kind of hope. The air smells of cold stone and gunpowder and something else, something harder to name. The smell of a city that has just changed itself and is not yet sure what it has become. The newspaper on the bench rustles softly in the evening breeze, and Paris, for one suspended moment, stands at the beginning of something it cannot quite see yet. The flag has stopped moving now. The mist has swallowed the sound of the last footsteps, and what remains is something quieter than silence, a city holding its breath, waiting to find out what it will become. Then the hammers begin. You hear them before you see anything. A low, rhythmic knocking from somewhere across the rooftops. Then another set of hammers further away. Then another, and slowly, over the weeks and months that follow, the knocking grows into something enormous, a constant, rolling percussion that never quite stops. It is the sound of Paris being taken apart and put back together at the same time. The man behind it all is Georges Eugène Haussmann. He is the prefect of the Seine, appointed by Emperor Napoleon III, and he has been given an instruction that would have seemed impossible to almost anyone else. Remake the city. Open it up. Let light and air and order move through it the way water moves through a clean channel. Haussmann does not hesitate. You can almost feel it in the ground beneath your feet, a low vibration, like the city itself is being gently shaken loose from its old shape. Whole neighborhoods come down, streets that have existed for centuries, narrow and crooked and full of shadow, simply disappear. The rubble smells of old stone and damp plaster, and something older still, the compressed memory of lives lived in small rooms. In their place, the boulevards begin to appear. They are wide, wider than anything Paris has known before. You walk out onto one of them, and the space surprises you, the way a forest clearing surprises you after a long walk through dense trees. The sky opens up above you. The new apartment buildings along the edges are tall and pale, their stone facades still clean, their ironwork balconies catching the afternoon light. There are trees planted in neat rows along the pavements. Young trees, still thin, their leaves barely casting any shade. But you can imagine what they will become. You can imagine standing here in 20 years, in summer, with the branches meeting overhead and the light falling through in soft, shifting pieces. The new streets are not just beautiful. They are practical in ways that the old city never was. Fresh water flows through underground pipes. Gas lamps line the boulevards, and at night they cast a warm, amber glow across the pale stone. You can walk from one side of the city to the other without losing your way in the old maze of alleyways. The city has become, in some important sense, legible, but there is a cost, and you feel it too. The people who lived in those old neighborhoods, the workers, the craftsmen, the families who had been there for generations, they have been pushed outward, toward the edges of the city, toward places where the stone is rougher, and the streets are not yet paved, and the gas lamps have not yet arrived. The center of Paris is being polished, and the polishing has displaced something real. You sit for a moment on a bench near one of the new fountains. The water makes a gentle, steady sound, a soft rushing that fills the air around you. A woman walks past carrying a basket of bread, the warm smell of it drifting behind her. A child runs ahead of her, shoes clicking on the new pavement. Life is already settling into the new shapes, the way water settles into a new vessel. And that is the strange thing about all of this. The boulevards feel inevitable now. Already, just a few years into the transformation, it is hard to imagine the city without them. The wide streets, the long sightlines, the sense of air and movement, it all feels as though it was always meant to be here. Haussmann's axe has cut deep. It has changed not just the shape of Paris, but the feeling of it. The way you move through it, the way you breathe inside it. You lean back on the bench. The fountain keeps its soft rhythm. The young trees shift very slightly in a breeze you can barely feel. Somewhere behind you, faintly, the hammers are still going. There is always another street being opened, another old wall coming down, another boulevard reaching toward the horizon. Paris is not finished. It may never be finished. But tonight, in the amber lamplight, with the smell of bread still faint in the cool air, it feels, just for this moment, like something that is settling gently into itself. Like a city learning, slowly, how to rest. There is a smell in the air that is hard to name exactly. It is something like fresh paint and something like warm stone, a little like sawdust still. And underneath all of that, just barely, the green smell of the Seine moving slowly past the new embankments. You breathe it in and you feel the city settling into itself, the way a house settles at the end of a long day. The hammers have gone quiet. The dust is beginning to clear. And Paris, wide and open and newly arranged, is ready to show itself to the world. It is the 1870s, and then the 1880s, and then the years beyond that, each one softer and more luminous than the last. People will later call this time the Belle Époque, the beautiful era. And standing here, in the early glow of it, you begin to understand why. The boulevards Haussmann carved through the old city are filled now with people. not rushing, exactly, moving with a kind of ease that feels new. Cafes have spread their chairs onto the pavement, and you can sit in one of them and watch the whole world pass by. The coffee is strong and bitter and very hot, and you wrap your hands around the small cup and feel the warmth move into your palms. Around you, voices rise and fall in conversation, laughter somewhere nearby, the soft scrape of a chair leg on stone. Paris is becoming something it has never quite been before. A city that believes in pleasure, a city that believes in beauty as a serious thing, worth working toward, worth spending time on. You can feel this in the way the shop windows are dressed, each one a small, careful composition of light and color. You can feel it in the way people walk, unhurried, as though the street itself is worth noticing. And then there are the expositions universelles, the world's fairs. Paris holds them more than once in these years, and each one is a kind of dream made solid. In 1878, the Champ de Mars fills with pavilions from countries you have only read about. Silk from the east, machinery from the north, strange instruments and beautiful objects, and things that have no name in any language you know. You walk through it all slowly, touching the edge of a woven cloth, leaning close to look at something intricate and small. The air smells of different foods cooking, of unfamiliar spices, of wood shavings and metal, and something sweet you cannot identify. And then 1889. That year changes the skyline forever. You have heard about the tower they are building. You have perhaps doubted it, but then you see it, rising above the rooftops, made of iron lattice, impossibly tall, catching the light in a way that stone never could. Gustave Eiffel's tower, 300 meters high, the tallest structure in the world. People call it ugly at first, an eyesore, a blot on the city. But you stand at its base and look up through the open ironwork, and something in your chest lifts. It is extraordinary. Not beautiful in the old way, beautiful in a new way. A way the city is still learning to understand. The artists are learning too. In the studios of Montmartre, in the small rooms above cafes, painters are doing something that makes the critics uncomfortable. They are painting light, not the thing the light falls on, but the light itself. The way it moves on water, the way it changes a face at different hours. The Impressionists. People will call them later, though the name was meant as an insult. You step into a gallery and see one of these paintings, and you feel something shift in you. It is not like looking at a painting. It is like remembering a feeling you forgot you had. Music drifts out of the cafe concerts in the evenings. Cancan dances at the Moulin Rouge, which opens in 1889, the same year as the tower. The sound of an accordion somewhere on a side street, the smell of chestnuts roasting on a corner, warm and sweet and slightly smoky, drifting toward you on the cool autumn air. Paris in the Belle Époque is not a perfect place. There are people who do not share in any of this beauty, who live in the narrow streets the new boulevards did not reach, who work long hours for very little. The city holds all of this too, quietly, underneath the glow. But tonight, standing here, you feel the glow. You feel the city opening like a flower that has been waiting a long time for the right kind of light. The light steadies, and with it, so does the room. You reach out and touch the wooden table in front of you. It is worn smooth by years of elbows and coffee cups and quiet conversations. The grain of it feels soft under your fingertips, familiar, solid. And in this moment, with that small electric bulb glowing amber above you, the cafe feels like the whole world gathered into one warm room. But the world outside is changing. You can feel it even here. It is the summer of 1914, and the city is holding its breath. The newspapers arrive folded and slightly damp. Someone at the next table opens one, and you catch a glimpse of the headlines before they are turned away. The words are large and dark. You do not need to read them fully to understand their weight. Everyone in this cafe understands. Everyone in this city understands. The mobilization orders have gone out. The posters have appeared on walls and lampposts and the wooden boards outside the post office. Men are being called. Trains are being filled. And the streets, which were so recently full of the easy noise of summer, have begun to sound different. There is still noise, but it is a different kind. You step outside for a moment. The evening air is warm and carries the faint smell of coal smoke and something sweeter, bread, perhaps, from a bakery still finishing its last batch of the day. The cobblestones are dry under your shoes. A tram passes slowly, its bell ringing once, gently, as if it too is trying not to disturb something fragile. On the corner, a young man in a new uniform stands with his mother. She is straightening his collar. He lets her. Neither of them is speaking. You look away, because some moments are not meant to be watched. Back inside the cafe, the conversation has grown quieter. Not silent, just careful. People lean a little closer to one another. Voices drop to a softer register. Someone orders another coffee, and the small clink of the cup against its saucer sounds very clear in the room. This is what the home front feels like at first. Not chaos, not panic. Something more like a long, slow exhale that never quite finishes. In the weeks that follow, the city begins to reorganize itself. Quietly, practically. The men who have gone leave behind their jobs, their routines, their particular way of sitting in a chair, and the people who remain, women, older men, children growing up faster than expected, they step into those spaces and fill them as best they can. Factories shift what they make. Schedules change. Certain foods become harder to find. You notice it first in small ways. The baker uses a slightly different flour. The butcher's window has fewer cuts on display. Sugar is measured more carefully now. These are not dramatic moments. They are just the texture of endurance, the daily, quiet work of keeping a city alive. And still, the cafe stays open. That matters more than it might seem. A place to sit. A cup of something warm. A few minutes of ordinary life pressed between the extraordinary weight of the days. The electric bulb above the table flickers sometimes, but it holds. Letters begin to arrive. Some are read aloud in low voices. Some are folded and tucked away quickly, pressed close. You do not know what most of them say, but you can tell from the way people hold them, carefully, with both hands, that each one is precious. Each one is proof that someone, somewhere, is still there. The city does not stop. That is perhaps the most remarkable thing. It bends. It adjusts. It finds a new rhythm, slower and more careful than before, but a rhythm nonetheless. Children still walk to school in the mornings. The market still opens. The church bells still mark the hours. And at night, when the cafe finally closes, and the chairs are lifted onto the tables, and the last light is turned off, the city settles into a kind of quiet that is not quite peaceful, but is not despair either. It is something in between, something that has no easy name. You walk home through streets that feel both familiar and changed. The cobblestones are the same under your feet. The same cool air moves between the same buildings. But everything carries a little more weight now, a little more meaning. You close your door softly behind you, and you rest. The taste of strong coffee sits on your tongue, bitter, a little burnt, the way it always is in the small cafes that have started appearing on every other corner. You wrap both hands around the cup. The ceramic is warm. Outside, the rain is still falling, the same rain that was falling when someone left that letter on the windowsill, folded once, edges soft from being held too long. But mornings move forward. And this city is moving forward too. Something has shifted in the air since the war ended. You can feel it even in the way people walk. Faster, maybe, or perhaps just lighter. The heaviness that had settled over everything, the waiting, the not knowing, it has begun to lift. Not all at once, not completely, but enough that you notice. The cafes fill up early now. People sit close together at small round tables, talking over each other, laughing a little too loudly, as if they are practicing joy again. The smell of coffee mixes with cigarette smoke and something sweet, a pastry behind the glass counter, dusted with powdered sugar. The woman behind the counter moves quickly, wrapping things in paper, handing them across without looking up. She knows what everyone wants. She always does. You step outside with your cup still warm in your hand. The streets are busy in a new way. There are more signs in the windows. More color. A poster on the wall across the street shows a painting. Bold shapes, flat colors, something that doesn't quite look like anything you recognize, but makes you feel something anyway. You stand in front of it for a moment. The rain has softened to a mist now. It touches your face like a cool cloth. This is what people are calling a renaissance, a flowering. The artists have come back, or new ones have arrived, and they are filling the galleries, the theaters, the small underground rooms where music plays until very late. You have heard the music drifting out from those places, a kind of jazz, loose and searching, the notes tumbling over each other like they can't wait to be heard. The money is moving too. That is what everyone says. The economy is growing. New buildings are going up. You can hear the hammering from 3 streets away, a steady rhythm beneath the city's noise. The smell of cut wood and wet concrete drifts through the air when the wind turns. Shops are opening. Restaurants. A cinema with a bright marquee that catches the light, even on grey days like this one. People are buying things they couldn't buy before. Small luxuries. A new coat. A radio for the sitting room. In the evenings, you can hear music coming through the walls of apartments, tinny and warm at the same time. That strange quality that radios have, as if the sound is traveling a long way to reach you. And it is reaching you. All of it is. But underneath the brightness, there is something else. You sense it the way you sense a change in weather before it arrives. A pressure in the air, a stillness that doesn't quite match the noise around it. People argue in the cafes sometimes, voices dropping low and urgent. Newspapers are read very carefully, folded and refolded. Someone at a nearby table shakes their head slowly at something they've read, then puts the paper down and looks out the window for a long moment. The city is growing. That is true. The art is real. The music is real. The coffee in your cup is real and warm and good. But history has a way of holding 2 things at once: joy and unease, expansion and a gathering shadow. You don't name the shadow yet. You don't need to. You just notice it. The way you notice a sound you can't quite identify, somewhere at the edge of hearing. For now, you are here, standing on a wet street, in a city that is painting itself bright. that is building and singing and staying up too late, that is trying, in the way that cities always try, to be more alive than whatever came before. The mist settles on your shoulders. The coffee has gone cool. Somewhere above you, a window is open, and through it comes the faint sound of a piano, slow, exploratory, the player working something out note by note. You listen. You stay very still. And the city breathes around you, full and restless and quietly uncertain, like something beautiful that hasn't yet decided what it will become. The last lamp in the club throws a long yellow stripe across the floor. You watch it for a moment. It reaches toward the door like it wants to leave too. Then someone turns it off, and Paris goes dark around you. That darkness is different now. You have noticed it for a while. It is not the soft darkness of a late summer night. It is something heavier, something with edges. It is 1940, and the city has changed in ways that are hard to name all at once. You step outside. The street is quiet, not the easy quiet of a city sleeping. A careful quiet, the kind where people have learned to walk a little softer, to speak a little lower, to look straight ahead when certain uniforms pass by. The German occupation came in June of that year. It arrived quickly, almost without noise. And then it stayed. And staying is what changed everything. The swastika flags hang from buildings on the Grands boulevards. You have seen them so many times now that your eyes have learned to slide past them. But your body still knows they are there. There is a small tightening in your chest every time. You cannot quite train that away. The city is divided. The north, including Paris, falls under direct German military control. The south is governed from a small spa town called Vichy by a French government that has chosen to collaborate. The word collaboration sounds clean and administrative. The reality is much harder to sit with. Daily life under occupation has its own strange texture. There are rationing cards now. You carry yours in your coat pocket, and you feel the paper between your fingers when you reach for anything else. Bread, meat, sugar, coal, all of it measured out in small official portions. The smell of a proper meal has become a kind of memory. The metro still runs, shops still open. People still buy flowers on certain corners. From a distance, if you did not know, you might almost think the city was simply going about its day. But you do know. And so you see the other things. You see the yellow stars that Jewish Parisians are required to wear from the summer of 1942 onward. A small piece of fabric sewn onto a coat. Something so ordinary made into something so cruel. You see the way some people look away when they pass someone wearing one. You see the way some people do not look away, and what that costs them to hold that gaze steady. The curfew begins at dark. By the time you are walking home tonight, the streets are nearly empty. Your footsteps sound very clear on the pavement. You pass a bakery with its shutters down. The faint smell of old flour drifts through the wood. Even that small ghost of bread feels like something to hold on to. There are checkpoints. There are papers to carry and produce on demand. There are queues that stretch around corners for things that used to be simple. And underneath all of it, there is a low hum of uncertainty. A question that nobody says aloud, but everyone carries. What will tomorrow ask of me? Some people resist, quietly, carefully, in ways that leave no obvious trace. A hidden newspaper passed hand to hand. A name not given when it was asked for. A door left unlocked at the right moment. Resistance in this city often looks like a small ordinary gesture, but small ordinary gestures, repeated enough times, by enough people, become something else entirely. Some people comply. Some people collaborate, and many people simply try to survive, which is not the same as either of those things, though it is sometimes mistaken for both. Paris under occupation is not one story. It is thousands of private stories, all happening at the same time, in the same streets, under the same grey sky. You turn a corner, and the Seine comes into view. The river does not care about any of this, of course. It moves the same way it always has. Slow and dark and patient. The reflection of a distant light bends and shimmers on the surface. You stop for a moment and watch it. There is something steadying about the river. Not comforting exactly, but steadying. It has been here before difficult things. It will be here after them. And right now, in this particular night, that is enough to breathe against. The water moves. You breathe. The city holds on. The way cities do, quietly, stubbornly, one ordinary day at a time. And then, sound. Not the sound you had grown used to. Not the distant rumble that made the walls tremble and the cups rattle softly on their shelves. Not the boots on cobblestones, measured and heavy, that you had learned to count without meaning to. No, this sound is different. This sound moves through the air, like something you had almost forgotten was possible. It starts low, a kind of hum, far away, somewhere beyond the rooftops, and then it grows, not threatening, not tight in the chest the way the old sounds were, but wide, spreading, like a wave rolling in slowly from the sea. Voices, lots of them, all at once. You stand very still and you listen. Paris in the late summer of 1944 is holding its breath and then, all at once, letting it go. It is August. The air is warm and close, the way August air always is in this city. There is dust in it and something else, something sharp and metallic that you can taste faintly at the back of your throat. But underneath that, underneath the smoke and the tension, there is something green and alive. The trees along the boulevards are still full. The Seine is still moving, slow and silver, the way it always has. And the city is waking up. You step closer to the window, the same window where the blackout curtain hung so long, heavy and dark, keeping the light in and the world out. But the curtain is pulled back now. You did it yourself, just a moment ago. Your fingers are still remembering the feel of the thick fabric, the way it resisted slightly before giving way, and now the light comes in. It is morning light, soft and golden, the kind that lands gently on old stone and makes it look almost warm. It falls across the floor in a long stripe. It touches the edge of a chair, the corner of a table. Small things, ordinary things. But they look different in this light. They look like themselves again. Outside, you can hear the voices getting closer. The Allied forces, French soldiers among them, the French 2nd Armored Division under General Leclerc, are moving through the streets of Paris. This is something that was planned carefully, deliberately. General de Gaulle had asked that French soldiers be the first to enter the city. And so they are. French hands, French boots, French voices calling out in French. You hear a woman laugh somewhere below. A real laugh, sudden and surprised, like she had forgotten she could make that sound. Then more voices join hers. You lean just slightly out the window. The street below is beginning to fill. People are coming out of their buildings slowly at first, the way you come out into sunlight after a long time in a dark room, blinking, uncertain, feeling the warmth on your skin, and not quite trusting it yet. A man is standing on the pavement with his hands at his sides, just looking. An older woman is pressing both palms flat against her cheeks. A child is running, for no reason at all, just running, arms out, in a wide circle. The air smells like warm stone and something floral. Someone has thrown flowers, or perhaps they have simply fallen from a window box. There are petals on the cobblestones, small and pale, already beginning to bruise at the edges, but still soft underfoot. You can hear, somewhere not far away, the sound of a bell. Then another, then more, the great bells of Paris, which had been so quiet for so long, beginning to ring. They are not perfectly in time with each other. They are a little ragged, a little uneven. But that is what makes them feel real. That is what makes them feel true. The sound fills the streets and rises up past the rooftops and spreads out over the river and the bridges and the old pale buildings that have stood here through so much. You rest your hand on the windowsill. The stone is warm from the morning sun. It is solid beneath your palm. It has been here a very long time, this stone. It has felt other mornings. It will feel many more. But this one, this particular morning, is something it has not felt in 4 long years. The city is not yet fully itself again. There is still so much to untangle, so much to grieve, so much to understand. But right now, in this moment, the bells are ringing, and the light is coming in, and somewhere below, someone is laughing. And you stay very still, and you let yourself hear it. The smell comes to you first. Dust and plaster, still hanging in the air after all these years. Somewhere beneath it, something warmer. Coffee, maybe. A bakery opening its shutters just around the corner. Paris in the late 1940s smells like a city remembering how to breathe. The crowds have gone now. The last voices faded down the narrow streets, leaving only the soft echo of footsteps on cobblestones. You are still here, standing in the quiet that follows celebration. And it is a particular kind of quiet, not empty, but full of everything that came before, and everything that might come next. France has a new beginning to build, and Paris, as always, is where that building starts. The Fourth Republic is young and a little uncertain. A new constitution has been written. New institutions are finding their footing. There are elections, debates, long evenings in smoky rooms where men in dark suits argue about what France should become. You can almost hear it through the cafe windows, the low rumble of voices, the clink of a glass set down on a zinc counter, the rustle of a newspaper folded and refolded. The newspapers matter enormously right now. People read them hungrily, looking for signs. Is the economy recovering? Are the factories running again? Is the bread getting cheaper? The bread is getting cheaper. Slowly, but yes. You walk through a market street in the early morning, and you feel the cold of the pavement through thin shoe soles. The stalls are modest, but they are there. Vegetables stacked in careful pyramids. A fishmonger calling out in a hoarse voice. A woman selling dried herbs tied in little bundles with rough string. You pick one up and hold it close. Thyme and something earthier. Something that smells like the countryside, like a France that exists beyond the boulevards. There is rebuilding happening everywhere, though not always where you can see it. Some of it is physical, cracked facades being patched, bridges repaired, railway lines restored. France's infrastructure had been badly damaged during the war, and the work of putting it back together is slow and unglamorous. It happens in the early mornings, before the city wakes. You might hear it, the low groan of machinery, the tap of a hammer somewhere distant, the scrape of a trowel across stone. But some of the rebuilding is harder to see. It is happening inside people. In the way a shopkeeper straightens her shoulders when she opens her door. In the way a young man walks to his first day of work at a new factory outside the city. In the way a mother teaches her children the names of things the names of streets, of rivers, of the country they live in, as if naming them makes them more real, more permanent, more safe. The Marshall Plan is helping. American money is flowing into France, into Europe, quietly and practically. New machinery, new materials, the hum of production beginning to rise again. You might not feel it yet in your daily life, but it is there in the background, like a tide coming in. And Paris itself is changing gently. The cafes are filling up again. Saint-Germain-des-Prés is alive with conversation, philosophy and jazz and argument and laughter, all mixed together in the warm fug of a crowded room. Simone de Beauvoir is writing. Jean-Paul Sartre is talking. Young people are gathering not just to eat and drink, but to think, to question, to imagine. You sit down at a small table near a window. The chair is slightly wobbly. The coffee arrives in a small white cup, dark and strong, and you wrap your hands around it for the warmth. Outside, a child runs past, chasing a pigeon. The pigeon escapes. The child laughs. It is such a small thing, but it feels like something. France is not healed. It will take much longer than a few years to work through everything the war left behind. The grief, the complicated questions of who did what and who stayed silent. Those conversations are only beginning, and they will go on for decades. But today, in this cafe, with the coffee warming your hands and the sound of a child's laughter still hanging in the cool morning air, Paris feels like a city that has chosen to keep going, quietly, stubbornly, with a certain grace. The pigeon settles on a windowsill across the street. The child has already forgotten it and moved on to something else. And the city breathes, steady and slow, finding its rhythm again. The paint is still slightly tacky under your fingertips. You press your hand gently against the wooden post of a market stall, and you can feel that faint resistance, that soft stickiness that means something is new. Something is still becoming what it will be. The sunset light falls warm and orange across the stalls of Paris, and the smell of fresh paint mingles with the cool evening air coming off the Seine. It is a small, hopeful smell. The smell of repair. Paris has been rebuilding itself for years now. After the long exhaustion of the war, after the slow, unsteady years that followed, France has found a kind of steadiness again. A new republic, the fifth one, if you are counting. And at the center of it, one very tall, very certain man. Charles de Gaulle. You have heard that name your whole life, if you are Parisian. He is the general who spoke from London when France was occupied. He is the voice that came through the radio in 1944, when the city was being freed. And now, in 1958, he has come back again. Not with soldiers this time, but with a new constitution, a new structure, a new idea of what France should be. He is a man who believes in order, in grandeur, in France as something permanent and serious and proud. And for a while, it works. The economy grows. You can feel it in the city, in the new apartment buildings rising on the edges of Paris, in the cars filling the boulevards, in the shop windows that are full again. There is a word people use, les 30 glorieuses, the 30 glorious years, a long stretch of prosperity that feels, to many, like a reward for surviving so much. You walk through the city in the early 1960s, and the streets feel purposeful. There are students in the cafes, bent over books. There are workers heading home on the metro, tired but fed. There are children in the parks, and the smell of coffee drifting from every corner. But underneath all of this, underneath the new paint and the full shop windows, something is tightening. You are young, perhaps. Or you know someone who is young, and the young people of Paris are watching the world change around them. They are watching protests in America. They are reading philosophers who ask hard questions about power and freedom. They are sitting in lecture halls that are too crowded, in universities that feel old and rigid and closed. The University of Nanterre, just outside Paris, opens in 1964. It is meant to ease the pressure on the Sorbonne, to give more students a place to study. But Nanterre is grey and unfinished and surrounded by poverty. You can see the Bidenvilles from the windows, the shanty towns where immigrant workers live in conditions that feel very far from Les Trente Glorieuses. The students notice this gap. They feel it. There is a restlessness building that is hard to name but easy to feel. It is there in the way conversations in cafes go late into the night. It is there in the pamphlets being passed from hand to hand. It is there in the way a young person might look at a policeman, or at a professor, or at a politician on the television, and feel something that is not quite respect. De Gaulle is 77 years old. He has led France through extraordinary things, but to a 20-year-old student in 1968, he can feel like a monument rather than a man. Something from another era. Something heavy and immovable. And Paris, as you know by now, does not stay still for long. It is spring when it begins. May. The air is warm, and the chestnut trees are in bloom along the boulevards, their white flowers soft against the blue sky. You can smell them on the breeze, that faint, sweet, slightly dusty scent. That means Paris is waking up after winter. But this May, something else is waking up too. At Nanterre, students have been occupying buildings, arguing, organizing. The university closes. The students move to the Sorbonne, and the Sorbonne, that ancient heart of learning in the Latin Quarter, becomes something it has not been in a very long time. A place of confrontation. You stand on the edge of the Boulevard Saint-Michel as evening falls. The chestnut blossoms drift slowly down around you. You can hear voices in the distance, many voices rising together. Something is about to change. You can feel it, the way you can feel wet paint, that faint resistance, that sense of something not yet dry, not yet settled, still becoming what it will be. The taste of strong coffee is still on your tongue, bitter and dark, the kind that was brewed quickly in small cups, passed between tired hands in the early morning hours after a long night. Paris in the years that followed those barricades had that quality about it, something sharp and necessary, something that kept you moving even when your eyes wanted to close. The cobblestone had been returned to its place. The street looked almost the same as before. Almost. But nothing quite sits the same after it has been lifted and put back down. There is always a small shift, a tiny gap, a memory pressed into the ground. And Paris, in the years after 1968, carried exactly that feeling. The city moved forward. It had to. Cities always do. But it moved forward with something new in its step, a restlessness, a questioning, a sense that the old arrangements were not quite as permanent as everyone had assumed. You walk through the early 1970s now, and the air smells different. There is diesel from the growing traffic, and behind it, something sweeter, bread from a boulangerie, its door propped open, warm air spilling out onto the pavement. The economy is growing. France is prosperous in ways it had not been a generation earlier. New apartment buildings are rising at the edges of the city, glass and concrete catching the pale morning light. Inside the older neighborhoods, though, things feel more layered. You run your fingers along a wall near the Marais, and the plaster is cool and slightly damp, the way old stone always is. This part of the city had been neglected for years. But now there are conversations about restoring it, about what to keep and what to let go. That question hangs over everything in these years. Television has arrived in most homes by now. You can hear it faintly through an open window. A news program, a voice reading headlines in that measured, careful French. The world is coming into the living room in ways it never had before. And with it comes a new kind of awareness of other places, other possibilities, other ways of living. Young people especially feel this. They have grown up in a France that is modern and comfortable, but they carry the memory of what their parents and grandparents lived through: the war, the occupation, the long rebuilding. That history sits quietly beneath everything, like the old foundations beneath the new paving stones. Fashion changes, music changes. You pass a record shop and hear something bright and electric drifting out from inside. Not quite American, not quite traditional French, but something in between, something new finding its shape. The window is fogged slightly from the warmth inside, and through it you can just make out a young woman flipping through records, her coat still on, her breath making small clouds in the air. The 1970s bring oil shocks and economic uncertainty to much of the world. France feels this too. Prices rise. There is a new kind of worry in the markets, in the newspapers, in the conversations at cafe tables. The prosperity of the previous decade had felt solid, reliable. Now it feels a little more fragile, a little more like something that needs tending, and yet the city keeps building. The Centre Pompidou opens in 1977, and Paris genuinely does not know what to make of it at first. You stand in front of it and tilt your head. All those pipes and colored tubes on the outside. The building wearing its insides on its skin. People argue about it in the way Parisians argue about things they care about, with great feeling and considerable noise. But the queues to get in are long from the very beginning. Curiosity wins, as it usually does. By the early 1980s, the city has changed in ways that are hard to name precisely. It is still Paris. The river still moves with that same unhurried patience. The light on a late afternoon in autumn still has that particular golden quality that makes everything look slightly more beautiful than it is. But something has shifted in the mood. A new political era is beginning. Old certainties are loosening their grip. There is a sense, quiet but present, that the next chapter is already being written. In conversations, in elections, in the slow turning of something large and invisible. You sit for a moment on a bench near the river. The water moves past. A leaf drifts by, turning slowly. The coffee from this morning is long gone now, but the warmth of it still lingers somewhere in your chest. Steady, familiar, yours. The doors close, and through the window, you watch the platform slide away into the dark. That little ticket, left behind on the concrete, already forgotten, already part of the city's quiet accumulation of small things. The train carries you forward, and Paris, above you, is changing. You might not feel it all at once. Cities rarely announce themselves. But if you walk out into the light of the early 1980s, if you let your eyes settle and rest, you begin to notice something. Cranes, scaffolding, the pale geometry of construction rising against a grey winter sky. Something is being built. Several things, in fact, all at the same time, all across the city. François Mitterrand became President of France in 1981, and he had a vision. Not a quiet one. He wanted Paris to mean something again, to speak, to be read by the world as a city that still believed in beauty, in culture, in the idea that architecture could say something true about who a people are. He called them the Grands Projets. the great projects. A series of buildings and spaces that would reshape the face of the city before the end of the century. You stand now near the Louvre. It is early morning. The light is thin and cool, the kind of light that makes stone look like it is breathing. The old palace stretches around you, long and serious, and very old. And in the center of the courtyard, something is rising that does not look old at all. Glass, steel, a pyramid. You blink. You look again. It is not finished yet. The scaffolding is still up. Workers move around it in the early cold, their breath making small clouds in the air. You can hear the low hum of machinery, the soft clang of metal on metal. The smell of dust and wet stone drifts toward you. The architect is M. Pei, an American of Chinese origin, and his design is not trying to hide. It does not pretend to be something it is not. It is modern, entirely, and unapologetically modern, placed right at the heart of one of the oldest royal palaces in Europe. Some people are furious about this. You may have heard the arguments in cafes, seen the letters in newspapers. The pyramid is wrong, they say. It does not belong. It is an insult to history. But others look at it and feel something else. A kind of quiet excitement. The sense that the city is not a museum, that it is still alive. When the pyramid opens in 1989, the light inside surprises you. You step down into the new entrance hall beneath it, and the glass above lets in the sky. The whole underground space feels open, airy, full of a pale and gentle brightness. The queues that used to snake around the outside of the Louvre, in the rain, in the wind, now have somewhere to go. Somewhere warm and considered. The museum itself begins to feel different, more welcoming, more like a place for everyone. Across the city, on the eastern edge, another project is taking shape. The Opera Bastille. It opens in 1989 as well, chosen deliberately. That year marks 200 years since the French Revolution, since the storming of the old fortress that once stood on that very ground. The new opera house is large and modern and a little controversial, as modern things often are, but it is built in a neighborhood that has always been working class, always been a little rough around the edges. The idea is that opera should not only belong to the wealthy Western arrondissements. It should come east. It should come to where ordinary people live. You walk past it on a cool evening. The lights inside glow warmly through the glass. You can just hear, faintly, the sound of voices warming up. A rehearsal. The notes drift out and dissolve into the street noise around you. A woman walks by carrying bread. A child on a bicycle wobbles past. The smell of roasting coffee comes from somewhere nearby. And above it all, that sound. Voices practicing. Reaching for something just out of reach. This is what Mitterrand's vision feels like, here on the ground. Not grand proclamations. Not marble and gold. Just the quiet presence of something new, sitting beside something old, asking the city to hold both at once. Paris has always been good at holding contradictions. The pyramid catches the last of the afternoon light. It glows, just slightly, like something thinking, and you stand still for a moment, watching it, not quite sure what you feel. Only that it is something. The sound comes to you softly at first. A low hum, almost like the city itself is breathing. It is the sound of construction, not the sharp clang of hammers, but the deep, steady vibration of cranes and concrete mixers working through the late afternoon. Dublin in the late 1990s is always building something, always reaching a little further than it did the day before. You stand near the glass pyramid of that new atrium, and the last of the daylight is still warm on your face. The reflection has faded now, the golden hour giving way to something softer. A blue-grey dusk settling over the rooftops, and in that quieter light, you begin to notice the city differently. Not as one thing, but as many things happening at once. There is scaffolding on nearly every second street. You can smell the wet concrete from here. That mineral, earthy smell that clings to the back of your throat. It is not unpleasant. It smells like possibility, if possibility had a texture. Rough and grey and full of dust. Ireland joined the European community back in 1973, but it is in these years, the mid to late 1990s, that European money really begins to reshape the physical city. Structural funds from Brussels are flowing in. Roads are being widened. The old docklands, quiet and rusting for so long, are starting to stir. You might walk along the Liffey quays and see cranes where there were once just empty warehouses. The water reflects their tall silhouettes in the evening, dark shapes against a pale sky. The Luas light rail project is being planned in these years. Not yet built, not yet running, but the conversations are happening. Engineers with rolled up blueprints. City planners in offices with bad coffee and good intentions. You can almost feel the anticipation in the air. That particular kind of civic excitement that comes when a city decides to take itself seriously. And Dublin is taking itself seriously now. The Celtic tiger is in full stride. There is money in the cafes, money in the new apartment blocks going up along the canal, money in the wine bars that have appeared where old hardware shops used to be. You walk past one of them and catch the warm smell of garlic and olive oil drifting out through an open door. It is a small thing, but it would have seemed almost foreign here 10 years ago. The streets feel fuller, not just with people, but with a kind of energy. Young people especially. Ireland's population is young in these years, younger than almost anywhere else in Europe. And many of them who left in the hard 1980s are coming back. You might hear it in the accents on the bus, a slight softening, a transatlantic lilt, someone who spent years in Boston or London and has now returned to find the city they left has become somewhere else entirely. The euro is coming, not yet in your pocket. That will be January 2002, but it is already in the conversation. The punt is still the currency you use, still the weight in your hand when you pay for a cup of tea or a newspaper. But there is a sense that something is shifting, that Ireland is becoming more deeply woven into something larger. A European story, a shared future. You sit for a moment on a low wall near the river. The stone is cool beneath you, even through your coat. The Liffey moves slowly, catching the last of the light in small, quiet ripples. A seagull lands nearby, considers you briefly, and then lifts away again without a sound. There is a particular feeling that belongs to this moment in Dublin's history. It is not triumphant exactly. It is more like relief, like a city that has carried something heavy for a very long time, and is only now beginning to set it down. The weight of emigration, of recession, of decades of quiet struggle, it is not gone, but it is lighter. You breathe in the cool evening air. There is salt in it, carried up from the bay, and beneath that, the faint smell of rain coming, the kind of soft Irish rain that arrives without drama, that simply appears, as if it was always there waiting. The cranes stand still now against the darkening sky. The construction sounds have faded with the day, and the city settles into its evening self. Lit windows, distant voices, the low rumble of buses heading out through the suburbs. Something has been built here, not just in steel and glass and concrete, but in confidence, in the quiet belief that this place, this small city on the edge of Europe, belongs to the future too. There is a smell in the air this morning. Something clean and cool, like rain that has not quite arrived yet. You breathe it in slowly. The city is still quiet. The streets are damp from the night before, and the light is that particular pale grey that belongs only to early mornings in early centuries. The TGV horn has faded now. The last echo of it dissolves somewhere out past the suburbs, past the ring roads and the sleeping warehouses, and the city has settled back into itself, into this new morning, into this new time. It is 2001. You might not know yet what that year will mean. Nobody does, standing here at the beginning of it. The cafes are just opening. You can smell the first coffee of the day drifting out through a half-open door, dark and bitter and warm. Someone inside is stacking chairs off the tables, the legs scraping gently against the tile floor. A small, familiar sound. The sound of another ordinary day beginning. And for a while, it is ordinary. The city moves the way it always has. People walk to work with their bags over their shoulders. Children go to school. The market stalls open, and the vendors arrange their fruit in careful rows. Peaches, plums, the last of the summer melons. You can smell them from across the square, sweet and heavy and alive. But then September comes, and the world changes. You feel it even here, far from where it happened. There is a shift in the air, something quiet and difficult that settles over everything. People stand in front of television screens in shop windows. They stand very still. Their faces are soft with something that is not quite grief and not quite fear. It is something in between, something that has no easy name. The city holds itself gently in those days. There are candles placed at the steps of churches and public buildings, small flames that flicker in the autumn wind, but do not go out. You walk past them in the evening and feel the warmth on your face. Just a little warmth, just enough. In the years that follow, the city changes in ways you can see and ways you cannot. There are new security cameras on the corners of old streets. There are new conversations happening in cafes and community centers. Conversations about who belongs here, about what it means to live together in a city that has always been made of many different people. These are not easy conversations, but they are happening. And that matters. The city is growing too. New tram lines are being laid down, the metal tracks set carefully into the old cobblestones. You can hear the grinding and the hammering in the mornings, the smell of fresh concrete and hot metal. Workers in orange vests moving slowly and deliberately, building something that will last. New neighborhoods are finding their voices. Places that were once overlooked are becoming places where young people open small restaurants and plant window boxes full of herbs. You walk through and smell rosemary and thyme and something frying in olive oil. You hear music coming from an upstairs window, something with a beat that mixes old and new in a way that feels entirely of this moment, entirely of this city. There are harder things too. The financial crisis comes in 2008, and you feel it in the quieter shops, the closed storefronts, the people who sit a little longer over a single coffee, because there is nowhere urgent to be. The city does not pretend this is easy, but it does not stop moving either. There is something stubborn in a city that has been here this long, something that knows how to wait out the difficult seasons. You feel it in the old stones under your feet, in the way the river keeps moving, no matter what is happening on its banks. By 2015, there are new faces on the streets, families who have come from far away, carrying everything they own. The city is learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to make room, how to be a place of arrival again, the way it has been so many times before in its long life. You sit on a bench near the river in the late afternoon. The light is golden and low. A child runs past you laughing at something you cannot see. A dog trots along behind her, ears bouncing. The water moves. The light moves. The city breathes. And somewhere just at the edge of this moment, something is quietly beginning. The wax is still warm beneath your fingers. You reach out, almost without thinking, and touch the edge of one of the candles left at the memorial. The wax has dripped and pooled and hardened into small soft ridges. It holds the shape of something that happened here, something people felt deeply enough to stop and mark. Paris does that. It stops. It remembers. And then, quietly, it begins again. Because even while the candles were still flickering, something else was already moving underneath the city. Something patient and enormous and full of purpose. Paris had been chosen. The 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games were coming. And the city had work to do. You step away from the memorial and walk a little further along the river. The air is cool. The water carries the last of the evening light. And if you listen carefully, beneath the ordinary sounds of the city, the buses, the voices, the distant music from an open window, you can hear something else, a low hum. The sound of a city preparing itself. The preparation had been going on for years. Long before the opening ceremony was even imaginable, workers were already deep underground, laying new metro lines. The Grand Paris Express, the largest transport project in Europe, tunnels stretching out beneath the suburbs, connecting places that had always felt just a little too far from the center. You think about what that means, not just for athletes and tourists, but for the people who had lived in those outer neighborhoods for decades, the ones who spent long hours on crowded trains just to reach the city they technically lived in. The new lines would change that, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, above ground. The transformation was just as visible. St. Denis, north of the city, was being reshaped. The Olympic village was rising there. New buildings, new public spaces, new bridges over the canal, and after the games, those buildings would become homes. Real homes for real people. That was the plan. That was the promise. You walk past a construction hoarding covered in bright illustrations. Athletes mid-leap, swimmers cutting through blue water, a city and its river, drawn in bold, joyful lines. Children have pressed their palms against the illustrations, leaving faint smudges on the paper. You press yours there too, just for a moment. It feels like joining something. The Seine itself was part of the story. Open water swimming and triathlon events were planned for the river. The same river that had been too polluted for swimming for over a century. Billions of euros were spent cleaning it. New sewage systems, stricter controls on what could flow into the water. Scientists tested it month after month, year after year. There was something quietly extraordinary about that. A city deciding that its river, its oldest companion, the thing that had been there since before there was a Paris at all, deserved to be clean again, deserved to be swum in. You lean against the stone parapet and look down at the water. It moves slowly tonight, dark and cool, and carrying the reflections of the lampposts in long, trembling lines. You try to imagine it full of swimmers. The crowd noise, the splashing, the strange joy of watching someone race through the heart of a city. And then you let that image go, because tonight the river is quiet, and quiet has its own kind of beauty. The years of preparation were not always smooth. There were arguments about cost, about which neighborhoods benefited and which were left behind, about whether the games were worth the disruption. These are honest questions. Cities are complicated. Big projects are complicated. Paris knew this better than most. But there was also something real in what was being built. Not just stadiums and metro lines. A sense that the city was reaching towards something. Trying to be a little more connected. A little more open. A little more itself. You breathe in the night air. It smells faintly of the river, of stone, of something warm drifting from a brasserie nearby, butter, maybe, or bread just pulled from an oven. Paris has always known how to hold two things at once, the weight of memory and the lightness of what comes next. The candles still warm from the hands that placed them, and the new tunnels humming quietly beneath your feet. You rest your arms on the parapet. The city settles around you. The river moves on, as it always has, carrying everything gently forward into the dark. There is something in the air tonight that you can almost taste. A kind of freshness, like the first breath after a long rain has finally passed. Clean and a little cool at the back of your throat. Paris in the months after the Olympics carries that feeling. The city has exhaled. The crowds have gone home. The flags have come down. And what remains is something quieter, and in its own way, more interesting. You are walking along the Seine on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early 2025. Not a special day. No ceremony, no cameras, just the city going about its life. And yet something feels different from a year ago. You notice it in small ways. The way the riverbanks look a little more open. The way cyclists move through the city with a new kind of ease. The way a child runs ahead of her father along a path that, not so long ago, was a lane of traffic. That is the legacy, right there. Not in a single grand gesture. In the texture of daily life, the cycling infrastructure that Paris invested in so heavily before the games did not disappear when the torch went out. It grew. More than 1,000 kilometers of bike lanes now thread through the city. You can feel the difference under your wheels if you ride. The smooth new asphalt, the gentle separation from traffic, the sense that you are genuinely welcome on the road. Paris has been quietly becoming a cycling city for years, but 2024 pushed that transformation forward with real momentum. You stop at a small cafe near the Bastille. The coffee is strong and slightly bitter, the way you like it in the morning. The woman behind the counter is talking to a regular about the new tram line. There is a warmth in the conversation, a sense of ownership. This is their city, and they are watching it change in ways they can actually use. The public transport improvements that came with Olympic preparation are still settling into everyday rhythm. New bus lanes, upgraded stations, the Rue extension that had been planned for years finally moving closer to completion. These things take time to feel normal, but they are becoming normal. That is the point. Outside, you can hear the soft rumble of the city waking up. A delivery bike, a child's laugh from somewhere above, the particular sound of Paris in the morning, unhurried, layered, deeply familiar. The Seine itself is part of the story. The river was cleaned for the swimming events during the games. That was not a small thing. Decades of work went into making that water safe. And now, in the months after, there is a real conversation happening about whether Parisians might one day swim in the Seine regularly. Not just athletes. Everyone. The idea feels hopeful, a little fragile, but alive. You walk down toward the water and rest your hands on the stone railing. The stone is cool and slightly rough under your palms. The river moves slowly below you, grey-green in the morning light. You watch a small boat pass. A heron stands perfectly still on a low ledge near the bank, as if it has always been there, as if it belongs. Maybe it does now. The city is also thinking about the spaces the Olympics left behind. The athletes' village in Saint Denis, in the northern suburbs, is being converted into housing. Thousands of apartments, a new neighborhood, taking shape in a part of Paris that has often been overlooked. That transformation is slow. It will take years to fully understand, but the intention is there, to let the games leave something real behind, something rooted in the lives of people who actually live here. You think about all the cities that have hosted the Olympics and struggled with what came after. Empty stadiums, forgotten infrastructure, the gap between the promise and the reality. Paris is trying to do something different. Whether it will fully succeed is still an open question. The city knows that. The people here know that. But on a morning like this one, walking beside the river with the smell of bread drifting from a boulangerie somewhere nearby, the warm yeasty scent curling gently through the cool air, it is hard not to feel something like quiet optimism. Paris has always been a city that reinvents itself slowly, not in sudden leaps. In small, accumulated choices, a new path here, a cleaner river there, a neighborhood given a second chance. And somewhere ahead, just visible in the soft morning light, a ribbon of new cycling path stretches out into the distance, curving gently around a bend, leading somewhere you have not yet been. The light is still on the river. You can see it from here, that long, slow shimmer of gold across the water. The Seine doesn't rush. It never has. It just moves quietly and steadily, the way it has moved for 2,000 years, beneath the eyes of everyone who ever sat beside it and felt, for a moment, that time was something soft. The last crumbs of the pastry are still on your fingers. A little sweet, a little buttery, the kind of taste that doesn't ask anything of you. It just stays, warm and simple, like a kindness you didn't expect. Paris in 2025 is a city that holds a great deal at once. You notice it in small ways. A medieval street name on a modern building, a boulangerie that has been in the same family for 4 generations, its window fogged with warmth on a cool morning, a stone wall in a basement car park, older than the country that now surrounds it, quietly going about the business of being ancient. The city has always changed. That is not new. What is new, perhaps, is the speed. There are cranes on the skyline now that weren't there last year. Whole neighborhoods are shifting, softening in some places, hardening in others. New apartments rise where old workshops stood. Glass and steel catch the afternoon light in ways that stone never did. And yet, walk down almost any street in the older arrondissements, and you will feel the weight of what has stayed. The Haussmann buildings with their iron balconies and pale limestone facades, the narrow passages that cut between them, smelling faintly of damp stone and old wood, the courtyard gardens you glimpse through heavy doors, a flash of green, a potted lemon tree, a bicycle leaning against a wall. Paris has always known how to keep things. There are people whose whole work is remembering. Archivists in quiet rooms, turning pages so old the paper feels like skin. Conservators in museum basements, cleaning centuries of grime from a painted face with a brush no wider than a fingernail. Historians who spend years on a single street, a single decade, a single life. But memory doesn't only live in institutions. It lives in the woman at the market who wraps your cheese the same way her grandmother did, in paper and then string, tied with a particular knot. It lives in the cafe owner who still chalks the daily special by hand, even though there is a digital board right beside it. It lives in the sound of a church bell at noon, not because anyone needs to know the time, but because the silence after it feels right. You sit on the bench a little longer. The air has cooled. You can feel it on your arms now. That particular evening chill that comes off the river, gentle but certain. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing an accordion. Not performing exactly, just playing. The notes drift over the water and disappear. Paris has had many difficult conversations with itself in recent years. About who belongs here. About what should be preserved and what should be allowed to change. About the difference between a living city and a museum. These are not easy questions. They don't have clean answers. But there is something in the texture of the place, in the worn stone steps, in the smell of coffee and rain, in the way the light falls at this particular hour, that suggests the city knows something about continuity, about carrying the past forward without being crushed by it. It is not a perfect balance. It never has been. But Paris keeps trying, keeps tending, keeps remembering in its quiet, stubborn way. You think about all the people who have sat beside this river. Fishermen and philosophers, washerwomen and kings. Children throwing bread to ducks. Lovers who didn't know yet that they were in love. Tired workers. Curious travelers. All of them watching the same water move. And now you. The accordion has stopped. The river is still shimmering. The last of the evening light is turning the limestone buildings a deep, warm gold, the color of old honey, of old paper, of something that has been kept with care. You breathe out slowly. The city breathes with you. There is something comforting in that, in being one small, quiet presence in a very long story, in knowing that the story was here before you and will go on gently after. The Seine moves. The light holds, and Paris, as it always has, simply continues. There is a soft hum in the air tonight. Not loud, not insistent, just a low, steady presence, like the city itself is breathing through 1,000 quiet machines. You notice it when everything else goes still. The gentle whir of an electric bus gliding past on the street below. The almost silent pulse of a charging station blinking green in the dark. These are the sounds of a city learning something new about itself. You are still here, still in this city, but the city is changing around you, slowly, the way a river changes its banks, not all at once, but grain by grain, season by season. It is 2025 now, and the streets feel different in small ways. You step outside in the early morning, and the air is a little cleaner than you remember. There is still the smell of coffee drifting from an open window, still the faint sweetness of bread from a bakery somewhere nearby. But underneath all of that, something has shifted. The sharp edge of exhaust fumes that used to hang in the morning air, it is softer now. Gentler. Not gone entirely, but fading. The city has been working on this quietly, steadily, for years. And now you can feel the results in small, everyday ways. The tram lines have been extended. You can hear them in the distance. That familiar metallic song, a gentle ring as they round a corner. More people ride them now. You watch a man in a coat fold his bicycle and step aboard, easy and unhurried, like this is simply how mornings work. And for many people here, it is. Along the main boulevard, the trees have grown taller. The city planted them in rows some years ago, and now their branches reach toward each other overhead, making a soft green tunnel in the warmer months. Right now, in early spring, the buds are just beginning to open. You reach out and touch one as you pass. It is small and tight, like a tiny fist slowly uncurling. There is something hopeful in that. On the rooftops, solar panels catch the pale morning light. They are everywhere now, if you know to look up. flat and quiet and patient. Some buildings have green roofs too, low plants and grasses growing up there above the city, holding rainwater, cooling the air in summer. From the street you cannot always see them, but you know they are there. The city knows they are there. Inside the cafes and offices, things have changed too. The menus in many places have shifted, more plant-forward, more local, more seasonal. Not because anyone was forced, but because the city's food culture has been quietly moving in this direction for years. You order something warm, a bowl of soup, perhaps, thick with root vegetables and herbs, and you wrap both hands around it and feel the heat move through your palms. The technology is everywhere, but it does not feel cold. That is the surprising thing. The bins on the street corners sort themselves almost. Sensors track what goes where. The streetlights dim when no one is nearby and brighten when you approach, gentle and responsive, like they are paying attention. The city's new digital infrastructure hums beneath everything, managing energy, monitoring air quality, adjusting traffic flow in real time. You cannot see most of it. You simply feel the results. A city that runs a little more smoothly, a little more quietly, and yet, and this is the thing that stays with you, none of it has replaced the human texture of the place. The old woman still sells flowers from her cart near the market square. The children still chase pigeons across the cobblestones. The cafe where you sat last night, where someone's old photograph album lay closed on the table, that cafe is still there, still warm, still smelling of coffee and something faintly sweet. The new and the old are not fighting here. They are finding a way to sit beside each other. You walk a little further down the street and pause at a corner. A delivery robot rolls past you on the pavement, small and white and quietly purposeful. A child watches it go, wide-eyed, then looks up at her grandmother, who shrugs and smiles, as if to say, "Yes, this is the world now. Isn't it something?" The morning light is growing stronger. The city is waking up around you, layer by layer, and somewhere in all of this, in the hum and the green and the quiet efficiency, you sense something just out of reach. A question the city is still asking itself, still turning over, not yet answered. The air along the Seine carries something particular in the early morning, a mix of cold stone and river water, faintly metallic, and underneath it all, the warm ghost of bread drifting from somewhere just out of sight. You breathe it in slowly. It is the smell of a city waking up, not all at once, but in small, quiet layers. The smart bench hums softly behind you. Its little chime has faded now, absorbed into the general murmur of the morning. A jogger passes on the path beside the water. Their footsteps are light and steady, a gentle rhythm against the pale stone. A cyclist follows a moment later, the soft whir of their electric bike blending with the sound of the current below. Paris in early 2026 moves like this, not in a rush exactly, but with a kind of practiced ease. People here have learned to carry the city's pace inside them, the way you carry a familiar song without thinking about it. You walk a little further along the embankment. The light is still low, golden and thin, catching the surface of the water in small, shifting pieces. A barge moves slowly upriver, its engine a deep, steady pulse beneath everything else. Someone on the deck is drinking from a thermos. You can almost feel the warmth of it from here. The cafes are opening now. One by one, the metal shutters roll up with a clatter that echoes briefly and then disappears. A waiter in a dark apron sets out chairs, each one landing on the pavement with a small, familiar knock. The smell of coffee arrives before anything else, strong and dark and slightly bitter. curling out through the open doorway like an invitation. Inside, a few early customers sit with their phones face down on the table. That is something you notice more now. People choosing, at least for a moment, to just be somewhere. A woman reads a newspaper, an actual paper one, folded in half. An older man stirs his espresso and watches the street with calm, unhurried eyes. Life in Paris today is shaped by small rituals like these. The morning coffee, the walk to the metro, the particular way people greet each other at the boulangerie, a quick word, a nod. Nothing wasted, but nothing skipped either. These habits are old. The city has changed around them, again and again, but the habits remain. You stop at a small market stall that has just opened near the bridge. The vendor is arranging oranges with careful hands, rolling each one into place. The citrus smell is sharp and clean, cutting through the morning cold. You pick one up without thinking. The skin is slightly rough under your fingers, cool and firm. The vendor smiles and says something brief, and you smile back. Further along, school children begin to appear. They move in small clusters, backpacks bouncing, voices bright and quick. They pass the smart benches without looking at them, already used to the city's quiet technology, the way older generations were used to phone boxes or newspaper kiosks. For these children, the city has always been this way, gently connected, quietly responsive, just there. The metro entrance swallows a steady stream of people. You stand nearby and watch for a moment. There is something almost meditative about it. The way people descend without hesitation, trusting the system, trusting the city to carry them where they need to go. Paris moves so many people every single day, and mostly it does so without fuss. A church bell rings somewhere behind you. Not urgently, just marking the hour, the way it has for a very long time. The sound travels across the rooftops and settles gently into the morning air. It layers over the hum of the city, the coffee smells, the voices, the river. And you feel it then. That thing that is hard to name but easy to feel. The sense that a city is not just its buildings or its history or its famous skyline. It is this. The daily breath of it. The 10,000 small moments happening all at once. Each one ordinary. Each one quietly essential. Paris has been breathing like this for centuries. Through cold winters and warm summers. Through change and stillness. Through everything the world has brought to its doorstep. And this morning, in the early light of 2026, it breathes again, unhurried, alive. The river moves. The coffee steams. Somewhere, a child laughs. The city holds you gently, and you let yourself be held. You wrap both hands around the cup. The ceramic is warm against your palms, not hot enough to pull away from, just warm enough to hold on to. That kind of warmth that makes you want to stay still for a moment, to not rush anywhere, to just be exactly where you are. The steam has settled a little now. It drifts upward in a thin, quiet thread. And the morning light coming through the bistro window falls across the table in a long, pale stripe. You watch it move, very slowly, as the sun climbs. This is Paris in 2026. And if you sit here long enough, with your hands around this cup, you begin to feel something that is hard to name. It is not nostalgia exactly. It is something quieter than that, something more like recognition. Because Paris has always been a city that holds its past very gently, not in a museum way, not behind glass, but in the texture of things, in the weight of a stone wall under your fingertips, in the way a street bends at a certain angle, and you somehow know, without knowing why, that it has always bent that way. You step outside after a while. The air is cool, not cold, just cool enough that you feel it on your cheeks, a soft pressure, like the city is paying attention to you. The street is already alive, deliveries arriving. A woman with a baguette tucked under her arm. Two men talking outside a tabac, their voices low and unhurried. A child on a scooter weaving between the pavement cracks with complete confidence. None of this is new. And yet all of it is, because the city you are walking through in 2026 is not quite the same city it was 10 years ago, or 20, or 100. It never is. That is the thing about Paris that takes a while to understand. It looks like it stays the same. The facades, the boulevards, the bridges, they have a kind of permanence that feels almost theatrical. As if the city is performing its own history for you. But underneath that, things are always shifting. The Seine has been cleaned further. There are swimmers now in summer, something that would have seemed impossible not long ago. The riverbanks have been rethought, given back to people on foot and on bicycles, the traffic pushed back and quieted. You can sit by the water and hear it. Actually hear it. The soft movement of the current against stone. The city has been thinking about heat, about shade, about what it means to live somewhere when summers arrive earlier and stay longer. Trees have been planted in new places. Pavements have been lightened in color to reflect rather than absorb. Small fountains appear in squares where there were none before. The city adapting, quietly and practically, the way it always has. And yet the old things remain. You pass a building that has stood since the 17th century. Its stone is dark at the base, worn smooth by centuries of hands and shoulders, and the simple passage of time. You press your palm against it for a moment. It is cool and slightly rough. It does not give. It simply is. There is something grounding about that, because transformation and continuity are not opposites in this city. They have always existed together. The new metro lines running beneath streets that Napoleon once walked. The glass and steel folded carefully between the limestone. The old market halls reimagined. The old railway lines turned into gardens. The old industrial edges softened into neighborhoods where people actually live and eat and raise children. Paris has always been a city that argues with itself about what to keep, about what to let go, about who belongs here and what the future should look like. Those arguments are still happening. They are probably always happening. But the city keeps moving through them, keeps adjusting, keeps finding a way to remain itself while becoming something slightly new. You turn down a narrow street. The buildings lean toward each other overhead, just slightly, the way old buildings do. The light here is softer. There is a smell of bread from somewhere nearby, warm and yeasty. The kind of smell that makes you feel, for a moment, that everything is fine. You slow your pace. You are not in a hurry. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question begins to form. Not urgent, not anxious, just quietly curious. A question about what it means for a place to survive. To carry everything it has been, and still, somehow, keep going. You hold that question gently, like the cup you held earlier, still warm, still open. The taste comes first. Something soft and yeasty on your lips, the memory of bread, maybe, or the ghost of a croissant you had this morning at a small zinc counter near the river. Paris always leaves something on your tongue. A little butter, a little warmth, the kind of taste that stays with you long after the meal is finished, long after you've walked away from the table and out into the open air. You stand now where you were a moment ago, your fingertips still carrying the feeling of stone. Old stone, new stone, side by side. the city does that. It places centuries next to each other without apology. A medieval wall breathing quietly beside a glass panel, catching the afternoon light. A carved doorway from the 17th century, standing just a few steps from a cafe, where someone is steaming milk and tapping their phone and laughing softly at something a friend just said. Paris in 2026 is still doing what Paris has always done. It is holding everything at once. You walk a little closer to the Seine. The water is low today, and you can see the pale stones of the riverbank clearly. They are worn smooth in places, smooth from centuries of hands, of feet, of rain, of time simply passing over them, the way time does, quietly, without asking permission. The river itself moves slowly. It catches a little of the grey sky and a little of the pale winter sun, and it carries both downstream without choosing between them. There is a smell here that is particular to this stretch of the city. Something mineral and cool. A little damp, the kind of smell that lives in old cities near old water. And once you know it, you never forget it. It finds you years later in a completely different place and brings you straight back here, to this exact bend in the river, to this exact quality of light. A barge moves past, unhurried. Its engine a low, steady hum beneath everything. Someone on the deck has hung a small string of lights, even though it is still afternoon. They glow softly, orange and warm, swaying just slightly with the motion of the water. You watch until the barge rounds the curve and disappears, and then the river is quiet again. People are walking. They are always walking here. A woman with a red scarf pulled up around her chin. Two men talking in quick, easy French, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. A child pressing close to the iron railing at the edge of the quay, peering down at the water with enormous concentration, as if something important might be happening just below the surface. And maybe something is. Paris has always had that quality, the feeling that just beneath the visible surface of things, something older and quieter is still moving. The city has been through so much, fire and revolution and occupation and liberation and flood and celebration and grief and rebuilding. And yet, here it is. Still here, still putting bread in the oven before dawn, still lighting lamps along the bridges, still drawing people from every corner of the world to stand exactly where you are standing now and feel, without quite being able to explain it, that they belong. That is the strange gift of this city. It does not ask you where you are from. It simply opens. It lets you walk its streets and sit at its tables and lean against its old stones and feel, for a little while, like you are part of something that has been going on for a very long time and will go on for a very long time after you leave. In 2026, Paris is not finished. It is never finished. There are new buildings rising at the edges of the city, new voices in the markets, new restaurants tucked into old courtyards, new art going up on walls that have held 100 years of posters and paint. The city absorbs all of it. It always has. It takes the new thing and holds it alongside the old thing and lets them exist together, the way the ancient stone and the new stone exist together, the way your hand felt both of them at once and found them equally real. The light is beginning to soften now. The sky over the Seine turns a pale, quiet gold. The river holds it gently. You breathe in the cold air. You breathe out slowly. Paris is still here. It has always been here, and in some quiet, unhurried way, so have you.